Joan, you ready? You ready? I would like to call the Peoria Public Schools District 150 Board of Education Committee of the Whole meeting for September 23rd, 2013 to order. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Here. Mrs. Ross. Here. Mr. Crawford.
Here.
Mrs.
Here.
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 Here. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item of business is announcements. Are there any announcements this evening? Board members have any announcements? All right. Next item is the approval of the minutes of the September 9th, 2013 meeting. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there any discussion? Madam Secretary.
Ms. Patel. Aye. Mrs. Ross. Aye. Mr. Crawford.
Aye.
Mrs. Wolfmeyer.
Aye.
Mrs. Costick. Mrs. Butler.
Abstain.
Mr. Floyd.
Aye.
5 ayes, 2 abstaining.
Thank you. Tonight's meeting is a committee of the whole meeting where the board has an opportunity to learn about issues in depth, ask questions, and interact with the staff and administration on key issues. The public participation segment of these meetings takes place near the end of the session. Dr. Kinney is going to present information on the stadium and our options for athletic facilities. There will not be any votes on that issue tonight, and no decision will be made tonight regarding the eventual resolution of the stadium issue. While this is important to many in the community, it is not, in my view, an issue that should monopolize the board's or the administration's attention. As we work through a complex set of decisions, we will be transparent and take into account the substantial community input we have and will receive. At 7 this evening, we're required to hold our budget hearing, so we'll stop at that point and convene the public hearing on the 2013-2014 budget. Once those comments on the budget have been heard, we will close the budget hearing and reconvene the committee of the whole meeting. Public comments during the budget discussion should be confined to the proposed budget, which has been posted on our website for some time. Now, regarding financial transparency, every contract over $25,000 is subject to a board vote, and those actions are included in board meeting minutes posted on the website. Contrary to what was stated from the podium at the last board meeting during the public comment, every expenditure over $2,500, whether contract or not, is listed on our expenditure reports on our websites. On Friday, September 13th, Vice President Wolfmeyer and I met with Dr. Kinney, Dr. Lathan, and Assistant Controller McKenzie to discuss the issue of purchasing cards. And we spent a good deal of time talking about the process and the procedures and the security of that system. It represents about 3.5% of our purchases on a regular basis. Because of the nature and length of the meeting tonight, we're going to ask that the administration present some details and a much more thorough explanation of our P-card process at the next meeting, which will be Tuesday, October 15th. So with that, we're moving on to information items. And the first is Remarkable Rule 3, respect our finances. And this is Dr. Kinney. Would you please begin?
Yes, this is based on a PowerPoint, so if you would like to move a little bit here, we'll get her going. My assignment that the board gave me was to look at available alternatives and some costs with regard to Peoria Stadium. Thank you, I think that'll help. Number 2, concepts for upgrading the football fields at Peoria High and Manual Academy, and we will have that information. Looking at the schedule for next fall for football, and we will have that. and then an evaluation of the 1% county school facility sales tax and how that might play into facilities improvements in the district. And we'll have a brief sketch of that as well. Now, I just wanted to kind of revisit options that we're talking about. Basically, tonight will be about number one up there, looking at the repair of the stadium, possible expansion of non-lease portions, and certainly talking about the football at particular Peoria High and Manual. And of course, anything we talk about has to have some source of funding to pay for it. What we won't particularly talk about tonight are options 2 and 3, but certainly number 2, work on a sale of the property other than Ricketts. I think we've pretty much agreed we'd like to hang on to Ricketts. That's our technology center and our warehouse to the park district. Now, no discussions have occurred that I've been part of, but I think we're looking at option number 1 first. Number 3, work on a potential sale of the non-leased property, which would be probably 35 to 40 acres other than Ricketts for a multi-use development. I think that area would be such that I'm not sure that any kind of a big box store would ever want to be part of that. There's probably not room, and I'm not sure it's that kind of a development. And then obviously number 4 is if we choose to just go on what we're doing now, then Manual and Peoria High would not get the attention that I think we're at least looking at the costs of doing those things. So again, mainly number 1 tonight is what we'll be looking at. And certainly funding is an issue for anything we choose to do. All right, the agenda. Now these 1, 2, 4, and 5 are my assignment, but in a little different order. So we'll start out talking about the football schedule, then we'll talk about Manual and Peoria High. And then I want to just take a look at some things that you might look at in an athletic complex, because I think one of the notions that's out there is that we're talking about trying to build concrete stadiums at Peoria High and Manual, and that is not the case. There's lots of options within options, and so as we look at some of the things we might do, there are certainly ways to bring costs down and accomplish what we feel is most important. Then again, we'll look at the stadium and then the role of the sales tax last. All right, so here's the football schedule. This is the schedule for next fall. Now, what you do have here, first comment or first point to make, first thing you can draw from this schedule is if you look at the left-hand side, right now this schedule is set for all Friday nights. So naturally, if we were going to look at, and I thought my assignment here was to look at how would the schedule work if we were to play everything at Richwoods. So what you see on August 29th, the first Friday night of the season, obviously, if you look under place, I have Richwoods. Those are games that are currently scheduled there. Everywhere where there's a question mark, currently that's scheduled for the stadium. So if we wanted to move to Richwoods, there are 4 conflicts in the schedule next fall. If we kept it as it is, certainly we can move one of those games away from that Friday night schedule. We can move to Saturday afternoon or Saturday night. But you can see there's a schedule conflict there. Friday, September 12th, there's a conflict. I should point out that one of those conflicts is internal to District 150. So it would be very easy, obviously, to move that Peoria High Manual game to Saturday afternoon or evening. Then same thing on October 3rd and October 10th. There are potential conflicts. Just a couple of points. Mr. Dunphy from Peoria High said, you know what, if we were going to look at having just Richwoods as our site for all of our games, he said, let's just schedule Peoria High on Saturday night so we have a consistency. We know what we're working towards. We can gear our practices towards that and so forth. And I think that's a good idea. That would help alleviate some of those conflicts. And just probably one other point here, we are scheduled next year in this schedule with the new conference that Quincy would actually come here 3 times. So it's quite a drive, and I have a feeling that it wouldn't be hard to maybe convince them that 1 or 2 of those maybe Saturday would work out as well. I have not been part of any conference discussions like this, but it is my understanding that the home team has the right to schedule both time and actually the location. So to do it, yeah, it would place 13 games on the Richwoods field. So certainly a discussion for a later time is how does that affect that field? All right, Manual Academy. Another notion that's out there is that why would we look at building fields at Peoria High and Manual? That means we'll have 3 fields to upkeep. Well, we already are upkeeping Manual and Peoria High. Manual has a very, very good field. The staff there does a fine job. They've got a good crown on it. It's got good grass. It's got a very nice 6-lane track. And so the upkeep is already there, and they're doing a good job with it. Right now, we already have generally 8 or 9 freshman and sophomore games there, and they do play there rather than at the stadium for those games. And every Sunday, they have quite a JFL crowd. So they do a good job of maintaining that property. It does draw a lot, and in fact, there are many times where I think our JV crowd attraction at Manual is very comparable to what the varsity draws at the stadium. Just wanted to make those points. So here is the football field. You can see, and you can also see to the left on the bottom, that is the softball field. Just a couple of quick educational type points. As you look at that track, that's what we call an equal quadrant track. Not that that's a real big deal, but what that means is that the 2 straightaways are both 100 meters and both curves are both 100 meters. And that'll help you when we look at other things that we might do. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but right below the black box, and that black box, that's a prepared area for like high jump, those kinds of track activities. Right below, you'll see a little dash. That's actually the goal post. And then down below that, straight below, you'll see another one that's pretty much in line with the ends of the straightaways of the track. That's a goal post. In between there is 120 yards. Now, as we look at Peoria High's property, this just gives you a little bit of background as to what we're looking at. Okay? Now, what would we do there if we were going to have football on varsity played there? What we would probably do is put in 1,200 or so seats along Griswold, and on the opposite side of the track, on the other side of the field for the visitors, put in about 600 seats. And of course, we would want to put in lights. There are lights there now, but those lights are really okay for an evening practice. They're really not meant for competition field lights. So I think those are the main 2 things we'd want to do. And where we just outlined the potential home side, it's a little hard to see, but up there in that corner, there's actually a building right now that serves as a garage. We do believe that could be converted to concessions and restroom and so forth. We did put a scoreboard already there. So, and I just might mention, with the crowds that Manual is drawing for their JFL and potential crowds for track meets, if we didn't do anything else, I really think we should look at putting in those the 600 seat bleachers on the what we'd call a visitor site here. That would really help with their JFL crowds, their underclass football games, and then certainly at track meets. It gives a place for teams to be organized, to view what's going on there. Because right now there's nothing there, so everybody's standing, everybody's moving with the football as it goes up or down the field, and from what I understand, have a lot of coaches that way. So it's just a good idea, and if you were to look at the cost for 600 seats, it's about $90,000 in concrete slab. So it's not a huge expense to just even consider putting that in. All right, here's a look at the whole property. I just wanted people to see that it already has a good baseball field in the upper left-hand corner. The field below that is the soccer field, and certainly it has the football field and softball field that you've already seen, and 4 tennis courts. What we would want to do, we're going to make it a little different suggestion here about Peoria High. They've got a great field there. It's in good shape. Certainly we need to continue to maintain it, but we're going to talk about potential of turf for Peoria High. I don't know that it's as necessary here. What I would like to do at some point is look at our parking lots that you see there towards the bottom left-hand corner, and maybe look at pulling some of those up and create a good practice area for Manual, because right now they don't have that, and I think that's important for the long haul. All right, so what are we talking about budget? Turnkey job on lights, $215,000. Actually, Musco Lighting has suggested a range from $190 to $215. I put down $450,000 on bleachers. I think there are some things we can do to save some money there, and I'll show you. I put in about $100,000 for some sidewalks, a watering system. Right now, that's something that has a certain amount of payback on its own because we spend a lot of labor moving around the different sprinklers at both Peoria High and Manual, and that takes a lot of time. So a sprinkler system makes sense to save on that labor. Restrooms, concession building, and again, we've got a phenomenal district level trade staff. We have our own plumbers, our own electricians, our own carpenters. Some of this is work they could do. These are more in the lines of like a turnkey job. And maybe to give a better example, the lighting, and again, I'm going to show you Musco Lighting, probably more than you want to know, but you know, we can install it. And actually, Musco sets this up. Many districts actually have booster clubs and parents help install the lights. But our staff could do it, brings the cost down to about $135,000. I left the bleachers, again, there's some things we can do there. And certainly, if we needed to for a short period of time, wouldn't want to do it on the long haul because it's not a great situation at Manual, but we certainly could use school restrooms and put out porta potties if we needed to. All right, Peoria High, a little different situation, and you'll see that in the graphic when we show you, but it has a double-wide football field, it has a square track, and like Manual, they host all of their own home freshman and sophomore games. They do a great job of maintaining that field. We actually put in some sod last fall. They spend a lot of time watering it. And you know what, I do want to stress the importance of what our guys are doing, maintaining those fields. This is just my personal opinion, but I think it's very important that the way that our guys are taking care of those fields, because when you think about it, right now they're being used for some games, but they're also being used for practice. And I think it's very important to have that good quality field for practice, even more so than necessarily a stadium type field where it's being used one night a week. They're out there on those practice fields 4 or 5 or 6 times a week. And so I think the quality of keeping those up is really important, and they've met that need. Okay, Peoria High, a little different situation, as I said. Now, and it's a little hard for people to see, but there's the 2 side-by-side football fields. All right, and the reason I kind of pointed out the goalposts for Manual and how there's that property on either side of the goalposts outside of the football playing area. Well, in an oval track, you know, those are there and they're important. What you see at Peoria High is exactly the 120 yards you need for football. So if we're going to put an oval track in, it does present some challenges. If you go to the top side of the football fields, they're depending on where you're at, going from the east to the west, there's a retaining wall. And if you go to the south end of the fields, there's also a retaining wall there that actually goes up to our parking lot. So to put in a track in this situation does present some interesting challenges. And I might mention that obviously as we look at this, we wouldn't put in that same equal quadrant kind of a track. We would look at having possibly a wider type field that can be hosted for multiple purposes, especially if we're looking at turf. That way you could play soccer on it, you could play lacrosse on it. I think lacrosse is coming. And then it also, what happens is when you widen the track, then those curved parts kind of squat down a little bit. And actually the international track is designed at that standard. So that's something certainly that we could look at for here and at the stadium as well. So, all right, possible costs. Again, looking at the turf, I may be a little high side on that turf, but there are going to be some interesting challenges with the retaining walls. So I think it's important to be as reasonable as possible. Track, $450,000. Again, Manual doesn't need a track. Peoria High, part of the problem is that square track. We need to look at having a competition type track, and then certainly if we're going to put a football field in there, the track needs to be part of the consideration. Lighting, again, $215,000. We could probably bring it back down a little bit. Scoreboard, $30,000. Bleachers, I put $600,000 in. We looked at about 1,800 seats for Manual. Peoria High has about 50% higher population, so we would adjust our seating accordingly. And certainly, again, site improvements here, a lot bigger number because of the issue with, the retaining walls and putting in that track. Restroom concession, I put in a number of about $250,000. I'll go back and say this again. Actually, Peoria High, with the new science wing, we built a very nice atrium area, and that atrium area is self-contained with public restrooms. So those can be locked. Those restrooms can actually be locked at either end so that we keep kids out of the atrium and keep them in the classrooms, or on a Friday night event, we can keep them in the atrium area and the restrooms and not into classrooms. So we have the ability to secure that area. So again, I wouldn't let restrooms stand in the way. And actually that atrium area is a very big area. So could we sell concessions? Sure, it's going to cost some cleanup, but no matter what you do, you're going to have some of that issue. So, and I put a little higher contingency there. So that's basically the cost of looking at Peoria High. And by the way, this is a board discussion, so please feel free to ask questions at any point. Yes?
You just might explain what ProTurf is.
Well, we'll get to that.
You're going to get into that. So,
Yes, I will.
okay.
We'll get to that. All right. Now, I put this in here just because this was a Journal Star article here. I don't remember, probably about a couple months ago. And when I had my numbers and I tried to figure them independently, they were right in line with what Washington High School is looking at. They're looking at a turf field for about $700,000. They're looking at putting in 2,000 seats worth of bleachers at a cost of right around $600,000 plus or minus. Soccer lights, that's what they want to do. Again, right on par with what you would do for a football field. Okay? All right, now, comes into point 3, a little education, and I think this is important so we all understand. So what you see here are what they call angle-framed bleachers. Now, these aren't raised, the front row, they put their feet right on the ground. But the reason they're called angle-framed is because you look underneath, and that's what you have, a lot of angle iron and crossbars and those kinds of pieces. This actually is a little bit more economical way to put up bleachers. They're perfectly safe. They're not going to blow away or anything like that. They're all over the place in central Illinois. What a lot of times will happen is you'll put this on perhaps a visitor side. These kinds of bleachers are not meant for huge stadiums. They're more appropriate for smaller fields. And actually they say that they're fine for up to seating 1,500. Now, you can't walk underneath. So if that's something that's important to you, and it may be, then these wouldn't be exactly what you'd do. But here's a picture of a football field. Now these are raised. Again, they're the angle framed. They're raised, and the reason you do that for football, and we would want to do this, is you have these big, tall, muscular, strong football players, and if you're sitting down too low, you don't get to see what's going on over them. Believe me, I've been to some football fields on the visitor side where they didn't prepare for that, and you're looking at players a lot of times. So, or cheerleaders or whatever. But with a raised, you get above that, and that's why they do raise them. Again, angle frame, $150 a seat or so, and that's why I said if we were to put in 600 seats at manual, about 90,000, we'd want to put them on a concrete pad. And what I didn't say is that would be probably along the lines of a turnkey job. We might even be able to save some money if we did it ourselves. Okay, here's another one with a press box. Again, angle framed. You're not going to crawl underneath them. I mean, obviously, when somebody drops a purse or a jacket, you go down and get them. And right now, they try to be very careful. They're bolted together or riveted, so you want to be careful that you don't have sharp-edged bolts and things. All right, now, here's what they call I-beam construction. It raises the price to about $250 a seat. And again, important for a couple reasons. Obviously, for a bigger area, and this is in Bloomington, Indiana, seats about 2,400. We're not necessarily looking at anything that big, although a couple thousand, and I'm sure this is along the lines of what Washington is looking at, Washington High School. But if you're budgeting about $250 a seat, throw in another $50,000 or $60,000 for your press box and your video deck above that, I think that's what you're looking at. Now, why would you do this? Again, for bigger areas to seat people, but also when you have them open underneath, especially if you put like a fiberglass or a sheet metal underneath the seats, then you've got a nice protection. So if you have a big track meet, 12 teams come in. Kids will actually go under those and stake out their own little area for their team to sit, so they're out of the sun or out of the rain. And then obviously if you want to put any kind of concessions or restroom type buildings. So I think for the home sides on either Peoria High or Manual, we would want to certainly consider this type of construction. Question?
No.
Okay, we'll keep moving. All right, Musco Lighting, and I apologize, I get into this a little bit, but Musco did look at Manual and Peoria High, and there's their range of a turnkey job that you can see towards the bottom of the size of fields and so forth, 190 to 215. And again, I have talked with them. If we were to buy all the equipment and put it in ourselves, more like about 135,000. This is fascinating to me. It comes with a precast concrete pillar of sorts that's hollowed out for all of your wiring harnesses and your underground electrical to come in. And then as it goes up out of the top of this thing that sticks about 10 to 12 feet above ground, then on top of that is your actual hollow metal pole that goes way up in 80 or 90 feet up into the sky. And again, it's all preset for your wiring harnesses. The lights that are at the top are actually designed in such a way that they pre-aim those. So when you install them at the top of the poles, they'll already be pre-aimed and set for you to go. And again, a kit form, I actually do have experience in a previous job where we did have parents and parent helpers actually came out and did this. But again, we have a staff that's phenomenal and could do this. Musco Lighting, this is exactly what Peoria Park District used in their 4 softball fields that are at the stadium right now. And if you go up and look, you can kind of see how this all works if you look at those lights close. All right, Field Turf. Now there are a number of different brands out there right now. Field Turf, I think, has probably one of the bigger names. And I think the important points here about turf is that it just gives you geometrically higher ability to use a given field. You can use it obviously many more hours a day without recovery. You can use it more times during the year than you can just a grass field. You don't have to worry about it becoming muddy. So if you had a turf field and the baseball and softball want to go out and hit balls, they can do that out on a turfed field, even though it's a football field. They can do it out on that turf field in late February or March, as long as they can tolerate the temperature, because they don't have to worry about it being muddy or sloppy or sloshy or anything else. So you get a lot more use out of that kind of field. Literally, in a given day, you could have your PE classes out there playing field hockey or soccer or whatever they're going to do. You could have the marching band go out there and practice on it. Then after school, the team can practice on it. And then that night, you can have a sophomore whatever kind of game, whether it's soccer, lacrosse, whatever. So it just provides a lot better, longer use of a given field. And in Peoria High, where we are a little bit challenged in the amount of property we have, that would allow the teams then to practice and play on the same fields. And I think that would be something to consider. Not saying we need to do that. I think it's just need to consider it. Obviously, at Peoria High, we're also starting with creating a new field. Even though we've got the ground and it's there are contour issues that if we're going to put in a field that would meet the track requirements, we're kind of starting over again with putting that field in. So, and I think that's important to realize. Also, I think one of the big selling points about any kind of turf, whether it's field turf, ram turf, other brands, is the idea of the maintenance on them. You're not watering it, you're not putting pesticides or herbicides on it, you're not putting weed-killing chemicals and things like that. So if we want to talk a little bit about green, you do save a lot of maintenance with that kind of a field. So again, just pointing it out, trying to educate people as to what alternatives are. And if you're thinking about AstroTurf from 30 years ago, the product is vastly, vastly different and vastly safer. And I didn't even get into that part of it. These fields are generally much safer for the athletes. Okay, this is a slide that we had last spring when we talked about potential costs. I do have a change, and what I did do, and you can see it crossed out. Obviously, one of the huge expenses was looking at trying to repair the concrete on the visitor's side. So instead, I talked with an excavating company and said, what would it cost to take that out? And I was a bit surprised because it was actually lower than I thought. And I might report that how they would go about doing this. Obviously, we would take the aluminum bleachers off because, and I didn't mention this in any other costs, but we could save money on other costs of bleachers as we reuse those seats. Or we might reuse them right in the same place, just in a little different style. So they would actually, we would pull those up, but they would actually just literally bust up all the concrete. They would grind it down to a form of CA6, which is just gravel that we use as a base for any parking lot. So if we wanted to create any different parking out there or anywhere else in the district, this would be moved to a different part of the property and piled up for reuse. Same thing with the dirt. They would pile it up for us to be able to reuse it. We do need dirt occasionally at different places. So, you know, obviously you'd have to look at the quality of the dirt. But they would come in, tear down that whole visitor side, and allow us then to look at using it a little differently for right about $100,000. Then what we can do, you know, those are very stretched out bleachers, take up a lot of room. They go from 0 to 0. So we could put in a much smaller number of seats, which would be fine, and we can choose that later, and certainly save on the $1 million kind of a price tag we were looking at earlier. Okay? Any questions about that? Yes.
So under that proposal, there would not be a visitor side at the stadium?
Well, no, if you look right under what I had for Iron Hustler, I said we'll put in about 1,200 seats back with the I-beam construction.
Gotcha.
And that can grow depending on what we want to do. I think as we go a little further into this presentation, I think you'll see why this might be of value to do this.
Well, but I'm also trying to think about it aesthetically. So that would mean kind of leveling that berm that we have out there?
Right.
Okay. Because that's how the visiting side kind of goes into that berm.
Right.
As it is now.
Right. Okay, now, there is the property, so you can kind of get an idea. And you can see the oval, and you can see the bleachers on the right-hand side. That's that big concrete pad. That goes from 0 to 0. It seats 5,000. Now, if we're going to look at multiple uses of this particular field, potentially, then one of our issues is that right now, there are no restrooms for potentially as many as 5,000 people. So if we were going to have an all-day concert, if we were going to have some kind of a sports event where multiple teams came in and took turns playing on the fields, you know, we need to think about that. So to lessen the amount of seating there is certainly a worthwhile notion to look at. Also, we need to look at widening the current football field there. And if you do that, we're not going to widen it towards the home side with the covered stadium. We'd have to go to the east. And so that means that berm and those seats may need to go anyway. Now, why would we do that? Okay, if we want to look at a potential multi-use field, and I'm just throwing out ideas here, if we want to look at that and potentially turf the stadium field, here's some numbers here that I think are important. If you go to the third one down under point number 1, football's 53 1/3 yards wide, and I find it interesting. That's for high school, that's for the NCAA, that's for pro football, everybody. It's 53 1/3 yards wide. Soccer, the middle point, they say the minimum recommended width is 55 yards, but with soccer, there's a lot of flexibility. Good soccer programs like wider fields. It changes how they play the game. It also changes how much they have to run, and so if you've got a good team, sometimes that can be an advantage. So obviously you want something wider. So anytime we would play soccer at Peoria Stadium, we're actually not playing on a regulation field there. So if we want to go wider, I think that's important. Also look at the length of a soccer field. They want it between 100 and 120. Well, you'll see on multi-purpose turfed fields, the soccer end line is the same thing as where the goalpost is for football. So they'll maximize and use the full 120 yards. And I think that's important. Lacrosse is 60 yards wide. That's the widest of the three. Again, assuming soccer, you wanted to keep it 55. So obviously we would want to look at a field that would be at least 60 yards wide. Yes?
You're mentioning lacrosse. Now, that is kind of forecasted as the sport of the future in
It is.
HSA. How important do you think it is to consider lacrosse and its future here at District 150 in reconfiguring these fields?
Well, a couple things. Number one, most schools around do not have lacrosse fields, but it's a sport, it's an emerging sport with the IHSA. It's a growing sport. I believe there are 4 high school teams right now in Peoria area.
Spring season, IHSA?
Brian?
I'm sorry.
Lacrosse, is that, I believe that's a spring sport?
It is.
Okay, for boys. And is it fall for girls?
I don't know.
Okay. And it's getting bigger at the colleges and university level. It is a very growing sport. And, you know, I think if we're thinking about trying to make that stadium property attractive for potential use in other ways, there's not going to be a stadium like that around that has a legitimate lacrosse field on it. So as that sport grows in this area, I think that could be an attractive feature, and I wouldn't want to leave it out. And, you know, it almost becomes a situation where it's lines on the field, so I don't know that it's that big a deal. Yes?
Actually, to explain that it's not that much, that's not that big a deal. It's just
Right.
the width and that.
But to have a competition-type field, I think would be possibly an attraction, and certainly one of the things we're looking at as we move forward, if we keep the stadium, it's going to be used less. So how are we going to attract other people? This may be a way. And if you have soccer there and it's a turf field, I would hope it would be a draw. And I think some other things I'm going to show you, I think there's reason to think that. Obviously, when you have different fields, you put different colored lines down for the fields. And while you might think it's confusing when you think about basketball, if you look at a basketball floor, you'll see the main court of basketball, and then you'll see lines for the side courts going opposite directions for practice, and then you'll see volleyball lines, and then you'll see volleyball side court lines, and sometimes they'll throw in some PE lines. So kids are used to multiple lines. Whatever sport they're in, they recognize those lines, officials recognize those lines, and so while it may sound confusing, they live with it just fine, not a big deal. Track, again, Peoria Stadium currently is 36-inch lane. National Federation, this is the national organization that runs all organizations across the country like the IHSA. That's where the IHSA gets its rules from, is National Federation. And NCAA both recommend 42-inch. Just for point of reference, the IAAF, International Amateur Athletic Federation, recommends 48. In fact, if you want to have Olympic trials, you got to have 48-inch. Well, I don't know that we're thinking about that, but the reason I even bring up the IAAF is because I told you about that design of a track where it's a little bit squattier, you know, and wider on the sides and then squattier on the round parts. That's their design, and they actually contend that it's faster for the runners. So don't know about that, but all right, Peoria Stadium track currently now. When I talk about it's 48 feet, that's both sides. So that's the north-south portion and the south portion, or however you want to look at it. If we want to go to 42-inch lanes and keep 8 lanes in there, then that's going to add 8 feet to the track. And if we want to go to a 60-yard wide lacrosse field, that's another 20 feet. So that 28 feet, that's part of the reason I'm even mentioning the idea of displacing the visitor side. I think if we're going to look at a multi-purpose field, and we may want to go wider than that for soccer, that just further indicates the need to look at that visiting side. Okay, I'm going to show you just a few athletic complexes that are out there. Some of these are privately owned. This is in Jacksonville, Illinois, and what you see there are 6 different baseball, softball type fields, little league fields. Anybody can use them. Number 1 is probably one of the premier fields in the state of Illinois. It's totally turfed, 385-foot outfield fence for the big boys, the best high schools. And why this is an attraction, what ends up happening, and it's privately owned, LLC up there, what ends up happening is different teams from all over the state, because it's a little bit central, you know, a Chicago area team, a team from our area, and a Southern Illinois team will meet there, and they'll do their little round-robin double headers right there. Everybody travels about the same amount. They pay a little bit to rent the field, and they don't have to worry about weather. Number 4 field there's been in existence for 3 years and they've never canceled a game. Because with it being turf, the only issue you have is lightning and you can usually wait that out. There's never a muddy field there. There's never a problem. So as we look at turf or any other ideas, I think this is just the kind of thing that we can think about. Not that I'm suggesting it. Here's Pentacle Dream Sports Complex. This actually isn't built yet, but you can see some cloverleaf ball fields, and then down towards the bottom left, you'll see the soccer fields there. One of those is actually turfed. So this is just the kind of thing that's going up. I think this is an interesting one in Pennsylvania. Part of what interested me is you look at they've got 17 fields, and they talk about you can rent them out for the kid in you for dodgeball, kickball, whatever. So people can do that, and some of them are turfed. But appears the white, there's actually a building there that has, it's like a big gym kind of a thing with basketball courts, volleyball courts, other recreational activities, fitness activities. To the right of that a little bit, there's actually a go-kart track and a miniature golf course. And then you can see kind of a dome thing. That's actually a domed inside field. It's about a half of a football field. So if you've got a group that wants to go in December and warm up on something, or ball teams, baseball, softball, they can do inside throwing and not have an issue trying to do that. And again, what intrigued me is it says 70 acres. That's about the total size of the Peoria Stadium property. Smith River Sports Complex in Virginia. This was actually built through a foundation actually did this, and a lot of, obviously a lot of soccer, football, lacrosse type fields. They've got a nice pond and parking. And part of the reason I wanted to show you this is the next slide, and it's very hard to read, but what they've done is it was built by a foundation, but part of the maintenance of the fields is being done, like there's Taco Bell Field, there's Bassett Furniture Field, there's some surgical associates field, so they're looking to corporate sponsors to help keep them maintained. Just a point of interest, and as we're looking at what can we do down the road, I think these are just things to kind of keep in mind. I wanted to put this one up because this one intrigues me, and this is, I'm kind of a high school baseball fan and softball fan, but this is Sacred Heart in Springfield, Griffin High School, and if you remembered the Lens fields that I showed you in Jacksonville, the one of them, number 1 field, it had the green outfield, and then it had the brown that looked like the dirt, going around the bases, and then the infield was green again. Well, actually, the brown was also turf. That was artificial. All of that was artificial. What Springfield did here, Sacred Heart Griffin did, is they've got their whole infield all in the same color. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, they can actually host a high school sectional baseball championship game for the IHSA, and 20 minutes after that game is over, they can start a high school sectional softball championship. They literally go in, they pick up the pitcher's mound, bring it forward, move the bases in, and then they've got sockets for a temporary fence in the outfield area, so they can actually set it up for one of the best fields in the state for high school softball. Above that is a turfed soccer field. I thought it was kind of interesting. I want to go visit this place, but it looks to me like this is relatively new, I think within the last couple of years. It looks to me like they left their track around their old football area, and I'm sure they use that as a practice area. But that's obviously saved them money on the new complex. Again, it's in the area, and they're creative and with somewhat limited space in how they're using it all. Okay, I did tell you, if you look at a multi-purpose field, this just shows white is the football, yellow is the soccer. So, and those yellow lines on the side, you could widen those however you had room for. It doesn't have lacrosse on it, but a multi-purpose field, the kids that play them get used to them. All right, again, this is the stadium complex. So again, if we were looking for a wider field, you move the visitor side back some by tearing it down and rebuilding. Just an idea, certainly something to consider. When we looked at that budget earlier, it said 1.6 million. So if you wanted to put a turf field in, you can add the 800,000 or 900,000. I would probably put a little more in for track. I had 350,000. I'd list more just because at this point, you'd be starting over with a different shaped track than what's currently there. I think that would add to the expense. So I didn't prepare a particular budget for that, but again, an idea to keep in mind. And maybe for everybody, just as a reminder, when we talked about potentially looking at selling just the non-leased parts, obviously the 4 ball fields that you see there, those are leased. The park in the back is leased, and then a connecting area. All right, this is just an idea again, if you really want to stretch the imagination, and it's hard to see, but below the current stadium field, I've got a rectangle on the side. I suppose you could put in another potential multi-purpose field there that could be leased out or used for all of our kids in the district. And then up on the top, in the parking lot area, there's kind of a sideways oval that's in an orange line. And certainly you could look at putting a clover leaf of other ball fields. The softball fields that the Park District put in are designed for adult softball. They're too little for high school boys baseball, too big for high school girls softball. They don't have dugouts. I mean, they're perfect for what they were designed for, which is adult softball. Sunday morning league, nighttime league, church leagues, whatever. If we wanted to have some other fields that our kids could use, I'd look at putting in a full-size baseball, maybe something that's along the lines of what they call a pony field, or slightly bigger than that for freshmen and sophomores, and then 2 softball fields that could be used by little leagues. If we could figure this out and find funding sources and maybe get sponsors, you could look at any kind of turf arrangement there with infield. A lot of the Lynn's properties, and I should have mentioned, some of them were fully turfed. A lot of them only had the infield turfed with the artificial and grass outfields. That's the biggest portion of a field. And I should mention too, when you look at turf, just so you know, the biggest field on a high school complex is the baseball field, not football. Outfields in high school baseball are big and then take up a lot of area. Okay? All right, one more, just visited another school real quickly. Galesburg is in our conference. This is kind of their current plan. You can see on the left there's a football field. That's where their football is now. They're moving to the east, assuming this is north, and I think it is. So they're moving to the east, actually a little closer to their high school. And what's really one of the neat things about this particular complex is at the top of that new field, you see kind of a funny shaped, well, it's not rectangular, whatever, multi-sided thing. That's actually an indoor athletic complex. So that's going to be where they can practice basketball, volleyball. That's their fitness center. That's their locker rooms for football, and just quite a fitness complex for the kids. And then they are adding other ball fields. I don't know how much of that's going to be turfed, but probably one of the points is this is one of our future competitions. This is what they're doing. They're going to spend about $15.5 million on this complex, and I'm sure the vast majority of it is in that building that's labeled number 5 up there. Okay? That building, it's real hard to see, but here's just kind of a conceptual drawing of what they're putting in there. And part of the reason I'm even mentioning this is because how they're paying for this is the county facility sales tax that Knox County has already passed. They're doing a lot of other things at their other schools, but this is how they're choosing to address their high school with that sales tax. So the last part of my assignment is to just go over this, and I've done this before, so I won't spend a lot of time. I don't know how we're doing time-wise. Okay, all right, so we'll take a little time. 17 out of the 18 school districts in the county did vote last spring to put this on the ballot next March. So it will be on the ballot. And the idea is that a 1% sales tax would be generated. And I think it's important that we remember that this is purely for school facilities. That's why they call it a facility sales tax. Okay, it's being done in Iowa in every county, and right now there are about 18 counties in the state of Illinois that have it. So what gets taxed? Well, it's typically what's taxed now anywhere in the county, whether it's in Brimfield, Elmwood, Chillicothe, Peoria, Grand Prairie, Northwoods, Kroger, Hy-Vee. But what's not taxed, and I think it's important to remember, are the high-ticket items, cars, trucks, boats, mobile homes, than, like going to the grocery store, the unprepared food that you would buy at a grocery store. So those foods are not subject to the tax. Drugs, over-the-counter vitamins are not taxed. Obviously, prescriptions are not. And not that it's real big here, but farm equipment is also not taxed. So if it's currently taxed, it would be. If it's not currently taxed, it's not going to be added to the list. There are lots of exceptions. And bottom line, what it means is, if you go to Chili's on Knox or University and you buy a $50 meal, there would be 50 cents that would be given towards the county schools to help with their facilities. All right, use of the sales tax. Obviously, on the left-hand side, new facilities, additions, renovations, ongoing maintenance, land acquisition, architects and engineers, got to have them involved. Durable equipment, which means non-movable. So if we go in and renovate a science lab at Richwoods or Manual, which we now need to do, any of those permanent fixtures, the cabinetry, the things that allow you to get the natural gas or the electrical or water, all of that, that's all fixed furniture. All of that would be eligible to be paid for out of a sales tax like this. Obviously, health, life, safety issues in this district are big. We have right now $11 million worth of work that's certified by the state that we could go out and sell bonds. We're not at this point, but that kind of work can be done. Energy efficiency is big. Right now, our staff has done a really, really good job of looking at energy efficient lighting to the point where the rebates that we are getting make the payback literally a year and a half in almost everything we've been doing. And I think that we've got some ADs and coaches here. They could attest to how the brightness of the gyms has changed dramatically. Plus, they're on and off more quickly than what the old lights were. Parking lots, we have a lot of lots that are not in very good shape. One of my biggest concerns probably is roof repairs. We have a lot of that coming up and will over a period of time. Cannot be used for textbooks, salaries, movable equipment, computers, things like that, buses. All right, a couple of ideas about this tax. Again, this is an education point. One of the things that you can do is you can abate property taxes. Now, I keep reminding people that this board voted last November to abate $1.5 million. That saved the taxpayers about 11 cents on their tax rate. You're going to probably vote that same way again this November. So we're already in that mode where we're taking some of the revenues that we do get and trying to bring property taxes down. We can take a portion of this money that we do get and do that same thing. We also avoid the sale of bonds, which would raise taxes, by using these sales tax revenues instead. And I already mentioned $11 million worth of health, life, safety, roofs. What normally would be done is you declare that the roof is a problem because it's going to create safety issues inside. You file amendments with the state of Illinois, and then you can go out and sell bonds to pay for those roofs. So if we have this other kind of a revenue source, I think it's something to look at. All right, there's the counties that have it. I do find it kind of interesting. There are about 12 within a 100-mile radius of us that already have the sales tax passed, and many of them are looking at their athletic facilities. Down in southern Macon County, Macon Meridian's doing some really nice things with their high school property, including new gym and so forth. One of the things that the sales tax does, it's not based on being a property owner. It's anybody that buys something. And that anybody could be somebody that's here downtown Peoria at a convention, or it could be somebody from Western Illinois coming over to shop at Grand Prairie or Northwoods, those kinds of things. So all of that contributes. And again, it's all throughout the county. I've pretty much covered that. How would we use the money? Again, we're looking at facilities all the way through the district, whether it's Peoria Stadium, Peoria High, Manual. We're also looking, obviously, one of the number one things we've talked about here in the last few weeks is the air conditioning to do the whole district. And right now, we've talked about doing some schools. We've not talked at all about doing high school. Obviously, 3 high schools that don't have air conditioning use up a lot of that money. There's the $11 million in health, life, safety. We could keep upgrading. We'd love to have more cameras in our buildings. Those are stationary. It really would be nice to have a funding source to pay for those. We're working on Wi-Fi right now. We're working on using about $3 million we're getting in federal money to do Wi-Fi. but the more we can do and to stay up with the very important infrastructure of technology is just incredible. And when we're talking about infrastructure, again, this sales tax would pay for that. Energy efficiency, we're doing a lighting, but one of our worst things is you look at the windows throughout the district, it would be nice to address those. And again, roofs. All right, I don't know how we're doing. Are there questions right now? I would like to mention, as we talk about this, and maybe we can come back and visit real quickly afterwards, again, maybe just revisit where we're at with these ideas. But I think one of the things, we do have coaches here, we do have our ADs here, and our high school administrators. I think it's important that we understand why it's important to them to look at Peoria High and Manual as facilities. So, okay?
Thank you, Dr. Kinney. And if we have other questions after the hearing here, we can come back and revisit that. So, okay. Well, we're not quite there. Let's do another minute. We have purchase orders over $2,500. Could you speak to that briefly?
I didn't know if any board members had questions on those.
I don't know of any.
A lot of it was CECO, things that we're doing for security, and a lot of technology equipment through our federal grants.
I have a quick question, I think.
Yes,
that can be
please.
addressed in a minute. On the manual proposal for the renderings you showed us, the bleachers for 600 people, it looked like it bled into the outfield of the softball field.
It doesn't. No, we would want to keep it close to the sidelines there, but we've already looked at that. There is a fence there, a home run fence for the softball, so not a problem.
Well, by the clock on my cell phone, it says 7 o'clock. So I would entertain a motion to convene the public hearing on the 2013-2014 budget.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Secretary?
Ms. Patel? Aye. Mrs. Ross? Aye. Mr. Crawford?
Aye.
Ms. Blair?
Aye.
Mrs. Costa? Aye. Mrs. Butler?
Aye.
Mrs. Lloyd?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Thank you. At this point, if anyone has comments about the 2013-2014 budget, please come to the podium and give us your name, please. And after those comments are concluded, we'll convene and we'll adjourn that session.
Sharon Cruz. I'm speaking to the budget with regard to legal services. Last year, over $900,000 was spent with one law firm. I've searched the budget and found legal services on page 17 for $100,000 for salaries and $16,647 for benefits. Where have you hidden the other budgeted legal services? I probably was looking in the wrong place. At the last board meeting, Dr. Lathan and Mr. Cloyd tried to belittle me for writing so many Foias and accused me of wasting money from the education funds, although no lawyer fees were mentioned, just the cost for the Foia officer and other employees. Of course, I had already sent a Foia asking how much the lawyers were paid to review and make decisions with regard to my Foia requests. Both the records of my Foia topics and the lawyers' fees apparently charged for my Foias are posted on Emerge Peoria's blog and on Facebook. I say apparently because my name does not appear on any of the lawyers' billing statements. In fact, almost all content has been redacted except the billable hours and the total fees. I contend that it is the district that is wasting money on lawyers' fees and that the district should be embarrassed or even held culpable. According to the FOIA records, district lawyers received $44,000 for FOIAs I sent from July 2008 to July 2013. I believe that most FOIA requests, especially mine, do not require a legal opinion at all. I question your priorities when you pay $44,000 to lawyers to protect yourselves in some ways that I don't understand, yet you budget only $2,000 for summer school. I found summer school mentioned on page 11 and 15. Did I overlook some other entry? Are there any FOIA laws or guidelines that encourage public bodies to hire lawyers to protect themselves from the results of information discovered through FOIA requests? Certainly, I understand that some FOIA requests are seeking very personal information that could result in a lawsuit against the district. Shouldn't those kinds of requests be easily distinguished from most, if not all, of the requests that I make? Is any of my requested data a legitimate threat that requires legal advice before providing the data? I never ask for student names or employee names. The board and administration do know that I gather information to share it, and that gives my FOIAs a legitimate purpose because forcing public bodies to be transparent is the very heart of the FOIA law. My earnest suggestion is that the board needs to decrease expenditures for legal services by hiring an in-house lawyer and/or a paralegal to handle mundane FOIA requests. Of course, my other suggestion is that the board and administration come to grips with the fact that they work for a public body that should have nothing to hide. They can agree and disagree with the public, but they should not hide their business from the public. When I go to the website, I go to About Us, I go to Finances, and it says $25,000 purchase orders. I go there and it says last updated November 2010. So, Mr. Cloyd, I would like you to guide me to the correct place to find the material that you told me was easily read on the website. I can't find it. I have FOIA'd it, but I cannot find it. Thank you.
Terry Knapp, 922 West Wilshire Drive, Peoria. Like to follow up on two things Ms. Cruz mentioned. Attorneys, first of all, I think we have another one here tonight. I still don't understand attorneys' fees, and I've heard the board talk about hiring in-house attorneys and paralegals. I just can't believe that we wouldn't save a ton of money and have expertise in the educational arena that that no one else would have if we had our own attorneys in-house again. This idea of spending $45,000 on Ms. Cruz's FOIAs by legal when we have people that already do the FOIAs. I mean, I remember Ms. Dunn was in charge of FOIAs, and there have been 2 or 3 other people in charge of FOIAs. I don't get what these people do. Are they just secretaries that transfer this information to the lawyers, and the lawyers charge us, you know, $1,000 or $2,000 a crack for a FOIA? I mean, it's unconscionable what seems to be going on here. We need to hire in-house attorneys. We don't need attorneys from Arlington Heights that come down periodically and sit at this table. I know Mr. Wolvert sat there for years at every meeting, and there was some continuity that he knew that what went on at each board meeting. I don't think that these attorneys go back and view all the board meetings to keep up to date and garner the new information. I just don't think that that's happening. So I don't think we're getting much bang for a buck from our attorneys. Busing is another issue, and busing is increasing in this district with the invention of the people going to Charter Oak and Lindbergh 3,000 miles on a bus or 5 buses or how many ever the buses are, with the closing of Kingman and the closing of Woodruff and the busing of all the people from the oldest neighborhood association in Peoria, which is the Avereville-Kingman area. You know, the busing is not helping education. Bullying occurs on buses. Discipline problems occur on buses. Nothing educationally sound happens on a bus. We need to come back to the idea of neighborhood schools, reduce busing. You know, we can't even afford to buy new buses. I think Mr. Kenny is very prudent in buying used buses, but it just shows the cost of busing is out of control. The cost of gasoline is still out of control. And we've got to come up with a way to improve education by reducing busing. The concept of year-round school, we hear this talked about all the time. Let's go to a Valesky-Hinton model. That's not year-round school. That's the same number of days.
Excuse me, please. There's nothing in the budget about year-round school, sir.
Certainly there is. Summer school is what I'm talking about.
Then you didn't say that.
Well, then don't interrupt me and I'll get to it. You're always
Keep on the
interrupting me.
That's because you don't stay on the topic, Mr. Knapp.
I'm on the topic, summer
aren't.
school, year-round school and summer school. That's what I'm on. And I would appreciate if you didn't admonish me every time I tried to speak at these board meetings.
Then stay on the topic.
I am on the topic. So anyway, summer school is the topic here. We need to have a 9-month school with a meaningful summer school. $2,000 allotted to summer school when our students need summer school to both improve their deficiencies and also get enrichment is, again, unconscionable. Whoever took summer school away needs to come up with a plan, a viable plan, to reintroduce summer school in Peoria, Illinois. Thank you.
Good evening, Jeff Adkins Neutro, 2610 West Barker Avenue, West Peoria, Illinois. Budget, student fees, are they being collected, yes or no? What happens when they aren't paid, and how does this impact the budget? The book inventory system, roughly 300 grand. It's the 5th week of school and we still have students without books. I'd like to see a presentation at the next board meeting regarding how this system has made book distribution more efficient, and if it hasn't, cut it from the budget. Cut your losses, hold someone accountable, get rid of it. Teacher IDs, I'm having more and more teachers come up to me showing me their IDs 3 years in. They are not working anymore. Dr. Kinney has talked to me about this, but what I would like to see is some money set aside so that teachers can get their IDs replaced, because this is what they use to get into buildings. I'd also like to see a moratorium on administrative travel and central office creature comforts until all of our students' basic needs are met. Books in students' hands on day 1 of school, functioning intercom systems, structural, age-appropriate playground equipment for every elementary school and junior high, etc. Thank you.
My name's Sabino Sierra. I live at 1708 South Stanley. They come down and visit us. It just goes to show you that you people are not spending our tax dollars wisely. And this is why I keep saying some of you people should resign, including the superintendent. Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments about the 2013-2014 budget? Thank you. Motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Madam Secretary?
Aye. Mrs. Ross.
Aye.
Mrs. Crawford.
Aye.
Mrs. McClure.
Aye.
Mrs. Costa. Aye. Mrs. Butler.
Aye.
Mr. Ford.
Aye. Thank you. All right. Dr. Kinney, was there anything else that you'd like to add to that on the stadium? I know that's a lot to digest, and I think there's an opportunity here for some discussion, which we really didn't get to. So,
Sure, maybe just a bit of a recap. Obviously, we've talked about what we might do at Manual and those costs, Peoria High and the stadium. Though very briefly, we did talk about options 2 and 3, but going back to option 1, certainly one of the things that we've got to figure out is a source of revenue to pay for this work. And when we started this journey, one of the things that we did talk about is if we wanted to do these things at Peoria High and Manual, and again, we've got coaches and ADs and administrators here that maybe could address some questions for you. But we'd looked at, is there something at the stadium there, knowing that the use is declining, to help pay for those other properties. So I'm just bringing that back up as a reminder. Yes.
Before we do that, I believe we have some members of the staff and administration that would be prepared to have some comments on this. Dr.
Yes.
Latham? Dr. Kennedy?
Can I just make, while I have it in front of my mind?
Sure.
One suggestion as we go forward in this discussion, as this is going to be an ongoing discussion, I'm sure that will come up with other meetings. Could we have a breakdown for any advertising dollars we get as a result of hosting of our athletic events? Do we have any, do we get, I mean, if we're talking about putting in new scoreboards and things too, I know it's not going to be, we can't do it.
Sale advertising.
Yes.
Revenue
Well,
from
and we do
advertising.
very little of that, and certainly we'd love to see more of that going
Well,
forward.
I'm just saying that if you're going to be putting, if we're talking about investing in new scoreboards, I would hope that a message board would be included where we could at least beat the cost of the, I know we're not talking like NFL dollars here, but
Yeah.
but something that's reasonable that can help us with ongoing facility improvements.
Absolutely, and we do have a board policy that talks about naming rights and things like that. Certainly, we need to revisit that and strengthen that policy. I think that'd go a long way towards
And that
helping.
falls on my,
That would help. And I'll just mention this as a side, Todd Hersey, the AD at Richwoods, has a meeting tomorrow to talk about somebody that's willing to buy a scoreboard with some advertising. So those are the kinds of things, absolutely. And that's why I mentioned Taco Bell Field and Bassett Furniture Field, because those are things that we do need to look at. But I do have all three ADs, and they did bring some coaches with them. So if you guys could maybe move down to the front row here, and certainly I think it's very important for all of us. I mean, I've had some experience with working with athletic facilities in a past life, and I know how important it can be. But I think it's important to hear from these guys.
Dr. Kinney, one of the questions, maybe we can start off with, one of the things I've been hearing in the last week or so as people think about using the money at Manual and Peoria High and upgrading those facilities. And I know it came from the schools that the schools would like to have things at their own facilities. Here's what I would like you to address, if you can, is the concern that I have from people that if we think attendance at football games at the stadium is bad, that no one is going to want to go down to Manual or over to Central on a Friday night for a game. And I know you guys have had good crowds for JV games during the day, so I guess I would just like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, you're right. We do get excellent attendance at underclass football games. We get excellent attendance at pretty much everything we have at Peoria High School. The problem is we don't have a lot of things at Peoria High School. We fill the gym for basketball games well before the end of the first quarter. Girls' attendance is steadily increasing since I've been there, which is only a short time. We need more activities in-house, and Dave maybe can speak to Manual the same way.
I think at Manual, it's the same. For basketball games, we have a very good draw. There's many nights when it's a Manual Central game, that we have to actually close the doors and can't allow anybody else in. I think one thing too that would help, we have to realize that whenever we have a home game, our athletes have to get on a bus and head out to Peoria Stadium, whereas it would be nice just to be able to go right outside. So that means every home game we've ever had, both Central and Manual kids have to get on a bus and go to Peoria Stadium. It would be nice to just walk right outside and play at your school. I also believe that some of the local people around on the south end, it would help. They would come out to the games, whereas maybe they can't get out to Peoria Stadium. So that's the other side of it. Some of the people down there might be able to go to Manual instead of out to Peoria Stadium.
just piggybacking off what Ms. Wolfmeyer said, and mainly speaking to Emmanuel and Peoria High, because like I said, we've heard many comments that people will not go to the games. But talk about in the past 3 or 4 years, the number of incidents that we've had after big basketball games. Because I do know one time, Reverend Butler, you couldn't get in because it was closed at the beginning of the first quarter of a game. So just talk about, have we had any major incidents at night after a game is over when we're dismissing and people from the community or particularly in the neighborhood around Peoria High Manual are coming out for events?
In my term at Peoria High, we haven't had any incidences in or outside the school that I recall. We take every precaution. We do the same for a freshman football game that we do for a varsity basketball game. One more thought back to the attendance at football games. Lights attract customers. And if we had lights around the football field, I think we could put it anywhere and fill it.
Any other questions?
I had a couple, maybe it's appropriate to ask these questions while these guys are sitting here. I had some questions about scheduling for next year. Here's my question. My concerns are, I don't know how long it's going to take us to make these decisions. How long can we wait if we have to make schedule changes for next fall, for the next football season? I mean, and I'm talking about from a Friday night to a Saturday night, or to make those kinds of, do we have a deadline we need to look at that we wouldn't be able to do that?
Probably the summer would be
Okay.
the last that we would.
So you wouldn't need it by January or February
No.
in order to make those kinds of changes if we needed to?
And actually, the contract or the schedules for next year for football are already out, but we would just have to make some adjustments, which could be done.
Okay.
Mr. Crawford?
And when does the stadium come up on the health, life, safety cycle?
The stadium doesn't.
It doesn't. I thought, but, okay. For some reason, I.
Those issues are there, and until we fix them, they're gonna continue.
Okay. Speak to Richwood's long-term needs now that we've had a 1% facility tax discussion. Further, I mean, I don't think Richwood should be left out of the discussion. How, and also there was talk of putting all the games on Richwood's field. How would that impact Richwood's?
That's been an issue already this year because we've been playing underclass games as well as the varsity games. And if you go out and take a look at our field on the what would be considered the west side, it's in pretty bad shape already. So if we get to a point where we can host a playoff game and we've got 5 or 6 more games to play out there, it's really being abused. And when I saw that first graphic, in all honesty, that's too many games on one field that's grass. We need some help getting that cleaned up, for sure. We were going to play our preliminary games on the practice field next to the field, the main field, but we can't do that because it gets too dark too soon, and we don't have lights on the practice field, obviously. So we're restricted to be on that field for our prelim games as well as the others. And that's the other thing is with this conference we're in, every time we host Rock Island or East Moline or whatever, we're playing 2 games. We're playing a 5 o'clock game and we're playing a 7:30 game. So even though that graphic shows 13 games, that's 26 games because you're playing a game before a game. So that's why it's very important that we get additional, help with our facility. Watering system, I believe we put $30,000 into it. Our 12th Man Club raised that money. That is beneficial. It does help. I think if we do build fields or whatever we do, if it's not going to be turf, that is a must. I mean, as Dr. Kinney said, it's a cost up front, but it's a huge savings in the long run. Be able to turn those sprinklers on. We got that rain. If we didn't have a sprinkler system keeping the ground moist, that rain would have put us out for the night last Friday. So other facilities around our place, I mean, you guys have done a great job. The gyms are ready to go. The lights are up. I know our science department is in need of some chemistry labs and stuff to really help that out. There you go, Ms. Clark. 35, Dr. Lathan, 35. I think that's the magic number. So, I mean, our athletic facilities are getting upgraded. I know we're working on the pool right now, but I understand where these guys are. When you have a home game and you're not at home, I think when you talk about Manual and Central, I'll just throw this out there. I've heard the safety issue or whatever, but when those lights are on until the last person leaves, I don't see it an issue. I don't see that we have any issues Friday night when we have Manual Central basketball games. The places are packed, you know, so that's my 2 cents on that, so.
What's the turnaround on the field? If, let's say, the schedule were to be all next year at Richwoods, what's the turnaround of changing over Richwoods' field?
If we wanted to put in a turfed field for Richwoods, okay, it would really, really be nice to make that decision by about May 1st, and that would guarantee August 1st completion.
Okay.
So they can do it in about 60 days. That's actually a little longer than that, but I would certainly want to know.
And is a turf field contingent upon what we decide to do with Manual and Central? Or
What you just have to do with the state?
or we decide to do a stadium? I mean,
All of the above.
Well, I guess my thing is like on the turf, because Richwood's grass is pretty nice, and
Right.
football is meant to be played on grass, so, I mean, you know, if you don't, would you have to change it?
Well, I think the biggest reason we would want to look at it is if we're going to play 26
You
games
would.
We're going
on
to play
that field.
26 games on a field
And
that
there's
we're not
no
going to
way
have
that-
grass.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Because
and I think that's the issue.
isn't the 2 games on a Friday night something new with the new conference? Because they used to play fresh soft games on Saturday morning.
Correct. Yeah,
But
that's-
now with this new conference, they want the sophomore game preceding the varsity game.
The Western Big Six has always played the sophomore game as a prelim to the varsity
So that's-
game, and
that's
it was
something
something
new.
we tried to negotiate, but getting into the conference, that was one of the things that they wanted to keep.
Okay.
So that's why you will
So
play.
that's something new.
Right. Now, when we do play each other, I have to add, when we play Manual Central, Richwoods, and Notre Dame, as a matter of fact, we will continue to play 2 games on Saturday. We'll play at 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock. So when we're within the city, we go ahead and don't play those prelim games. So I guess 26, it probably could be 18 to 20, because when we play each other, we won't do that. So.
Ms. Ross, you had a question?
Yes, I did. You know, the decision to go with Manual and Central and upgrade those areas would then, you know, since Richwoods is already prepared to do what they need to do without it, as long as it's, you know, other schools have the home schools ready. I mean, that's something we should be looking at first, don't you think?
Yes. I mean, you know, to hear these guys talk,
As far as turfing, that kind of
yeah,
thing.
they would love to have their own facilities. I might mention, and we will have more information as we go along, but let's take Richwoods for an example. We talked, I did briefly, and so did Todd, mentioned the whole idea of the science labs. You know, we talked about what we did at Peoria High, and it's just phenomenal what we did there. But the science departments at Richwoods and Manual need to be addressed because they are literally almost as old as what Peoria High's was. So we do need to address those. That can be done in this particular revenue cycle with a sales tax. Obviously, we're looking at air conditioning. One of the things that we desperately need to do, and it's somewhat athletic, but supposedly also not, you can't go from the main gym to the second gym or to the pool without going through locker rooms. So if they're having a tournament or something like that, or if you're a kid and you're on the east side of the Richwoods High School and you want to get to the second gym, it would be nice to have a hallway that does that. So we have some ideas for a hallway. We're generating those kinds of ideas for all of our facilities. One of the things, and you're aware, we tried to put plans together and it just came out too high priced, and so we had to put a halt to it. But our plans for redoing Manual pool that we did have, we'd like to get that back on the front burner, but at literally $450,000, $500,000. What it would do is it would make it one of the best pools in the area, bar none, because of the way that the redesign to make it a deeper pool by raising the sides would have made it a phenomenal pool. So those are the kinds of things that we can bring back on our list of things that we'd like to get accomplished.
Ms.
Yes.
Costick?
In doing that over at Manual, does that make it a competitive pool or?
Well, yeah, it would have, and I'm not into swimming, but from what I understand, the way we would have done it would have made the pool all a deeper pool. A lot of times what happened is, like at Richwoods, when they redid the pool a number of years ago, when the National Federation, again, that's that rulemaking association, when they said the pools have to be deeper, what people did was they drained the pool and they scalped out of the bottom, but they only did that in front of the area where you dive in, okay? So once you're swimming, and I don't understand the science of it, but once you're swimming, if it's all that deep, then you'll get better times in your swimming. Swimmers love that. So that's what we were going to do at Manual by raising the sides.
Aaron Butler.
My question to the athletic directors and perhaps Dr. Lathan, we talked about the benefit of improving the facilities, but I'm wondering about the benefit on the improvement of student skills and advantages in competing and therefore their future in sports.
Sure. At Peoria High, a lot of people don't know this, but when students around the state get out of school at 2:30, they put on their gear and walk out to practice. At Peoria High School, you grab your bag and run to a yellow bus, and you go off to soccer practice somewhere, and you go off to softball practice somewhere. We're very proud of football, on the other hand, who stays at home for practice. They start by going to a classroom and having an hour of study time and sometime football classroom time, and then go out to practice. We'd love to do that with all sports. We'd love to have the opportunity to do that with baseball, but they practice off-site and have to get there, and 30, 45 kids. We can't keep them at school for an hour studying and then also get them where they need to go for practice. Plus, we're losing out on sunlight. We don't have lights down there. Softball's the same way. Soccer's the same way. Swimming, same way. We'd love to have facilities, and I think at Peoria High it's more important, that the turf is more important than the other schools. As you saw that map, we're very locked on what grass we have. With turf, all 3 football teams, 90 kids this year, could practice on the same field. They could be done by 5:30 in time for the soccer game to begin. The soccer team could practice on the baseball field in the fall. In the spring, the girls' soccer team would practice on the turf. Baseball would be able to use an upgraded baseball facility, and most of the conversation tonight's been about football, but when we talked about this, every other sport came to my mind. Another thing, as far as athletic directors, the other athletic directors in the state schedule transportation for road games. I schedule transportation for 5 events every single day. We take transportation to every practice. We take transportation to just about every game. So did I answer your question? At
Partly,
the academic
other
time,
but skill enhancement of their sport, how will these improvements help the students to compete better?
well, the coaches and the players will all get an hour back in their day, not having to travel to and fro. Well, I'm not sure, again, if I'm answering your question, but what popped into my mind was lightning. I worry about this every day, every week, every weather report. If the baseball team is down in the baseball field and lightning comes over that bluff, which it does every spring, how are we going to get where we need to go? We can't go into the school building. It's not our school building. Softball, same thing. We don't have access to Keller during softball practice, and what we call a yellow bus and hope they get there in time for to beat the weather. There are all these safety and academic and skill concerns that coaches have to be prepared for.
Thank you.
I think if you talk about turf and enhancement of athletic abilities and stuff, last year I canceled 44 games between baseball and softball because of the weather. If we had turf, we could have practiced outside. Last year, our softball team had 10 practices outside, 10, because of the weather. How good are you going to get if you're inside in the gym all the time playing softball? So I think the improvement of all these facilities will definitely improve our ability to compete because we can get outside. Is that
Day games.
maybe?
Do the Cubs practice indoors?
Do the Cubs?
So you guys didn't hear that up here.
I'm a Cardinal fan, so.
Are there 26 games out or something like that? Mr. Crawford.
Speak to how having a home field would improve the rivalries in the conference. Or sense of community. I mean, from where I sit, football could use a boost on this side of the river. Metamora, Washington, Richwoods, no doubt, has had its success, but it used to be where Manual, Central, Richwoods, the schools on this side of the river dominated the headlines when it came to football. How would having our own fields potentially improve that?
Well, I think one thing that would happen is there would be a sense of ownership at your field, and that goes a long way. Right now, just sharing the facilities, like Peoria Stadium, you don't get that ownership. But when you would be at your own school, that ownership would be there, and especially with the community and the kids. We were at Quincy this weekend, and it just amazed me because they had the tents going with the pork chop sandwiches, and somebody else was doing something else. And I think you could start to get those kind of things at Central and at Manual with that kind of an environment. And that adds a whole lot more.
Mr. Patel?
Yeah,
Go ahead. No,
okay.
please.
I'll add to that. I'll invite everybody to come out Friday night, probably, 6:30, and watch our kids walk out of the locker room. We got a night head on the door. Everybody pounds it twice as they walk out. We sell the pork chops. We sell lemonade shake-ups. I mean, it's a big deal. And when you're in your own environment, you're at your own school, you're not getting on a bus to go to the stadium. I mean, I don't know. Just come out Friday night and watch our football team. Don't watch them on the field. Stay in the parking lot. Watch them come in and out. They take a lot of pride in it.
You've sold me with the lemon shake-ups.
Oh, they're outstanding. They're outstanding. We've sold 700 of those in the last 2 weeks. So.
You had a question too, Hillary?
Yes. I wondered about the parking situation at Peoria High and hosting football games at Peoria High in terms of parking. Anyone who can speak to that.
Thanks. Obviously, we have to be careful about that. We have to look at other ways to expand the parking. Now that we do have Peoria High North, there are a number of spots there. We can add to spots at that part of the facility. So certainly, we're going to keep an eye on that particular situation as well. So, although keep in mind, if you're drawing 3,000 people for a Friday night basketball game,
Sure.
The parking's there. So I don't know that it's a critical issue.
Well, yeah, and I've been down at Manual when large events were on at Manual, and the parking seemed fine. I just haven't
Right,
been
right.
at Peoria High when it was a large enough event to be concerned.
Ms. Mulfire?
Either way, if we would decide to go either way with upgrades to the stadium or to the two schools, how long are those going to take?
Well,
and again, I'm asking that question from the standpoint of a timeline when we need to make decisions.
to do what we would like to do at Manual would take very little time. It's a matter of getting the bids out. We're talking about numbers that we'd have to do sealed bids, and we would do that. But if we had 2 months of preparation for that, and some of the things we'd like to do at either place, we'd like to do those, some of it ourselves. So certainly by middle spring, I'd like to be well underway. Especially at Manual, Peoria High, that's going to be a bigger deal. That'll take a year.
So I'm looking for next fall. So even if we would decide, if the decision was made to make the upgrades at the two high schools, what would Peoria High do for football next year?
Well, if we know what the outcome is, we can make do for a year with anything. If the stadium's available, we'd play there. If we have to play our road games at Manual and Richwoods, we would play there. But the outcome is what we're concerned about. We want the best for a long, long time. I have about 14 years left as athletic director, I hope. So I'm patient for the time being.
Another question?
Put that in the budget.
I just have a comment, which is that I definitely, as we discuss this and we discuss the upgrades, whether it's to the stadium or the high schools, to me, it is very important that we be discussing other sports and what we're going to see with the soccer stadium or lacrosse or went to a lacrosse school. I have opinions. But talking about these other sports as well, because I have real concerns about in 15 years what the state of high school football is going to be. There have been articles in Sports Illustrated, Grantland, the Chicago Tribune, the New Yorker, questioning how long kids are going to keep playing football and how long smaller school programs are going to remain viable if parents don't allow their kids to play. I have questions about our increasing insurance premiums for the football. Lacrosse is also a high concussion sport. But that,
More concussions than soccer?
yes, soccer, actually, girls' soccer has the second highest rate of concussions after football at the high school level. But I just want to make sure that as we have these discussions and we're thinking about these improvements that are going to be long-term for the district, we're not thinking about only football, because I have real concerns about the financial viability of football in the longer term. So we're talking about these multi-use fields. That is definitely something that I need to see whichever direction we go is multi-use situations.
Ms. Wolfmeyer, Ms. Russ, did you have a question? I looked over there and it looked like you had one. Oh.
I have a couple of questions about the presentation. First of all, the cost that you had up there, the 1 million to 1.5 for the stadium renovations, does that include if we would do all of those extra dimensions for the multi-sports?
Well, no. It was 1.6, okay? If I were going to plan on the stadium, certainly you would want to look at those renovations. A lot of that was, on the home side as well, addressing a lot of things. And I think I mentioned, we could turn it back on if we wanted, but, I would probably want to put a little bit more into the track than I had 350 at the high end. I would want to go a little more because we'd be changing the shape of the track and putting a turf field in the middle. So if you took the 1.6 that was there, I think if you looked at the idea of a multi-purpose turf field, a decent competitive IAAF-shaped track, not 48-inch lane, but 42, and moving those visitors' bleachers and then fixing up the things that we want to fix up, I would think probably in the neighborhood of 2.8 to 3 million would be what it would take.
Okay. Of the 1 million to 1.5 that didn't include all of those things, am I correct that those are things that have to be done? That is not a wish list. Those are things that once we start, pretty much those things would need to be done.
Yeah, if you want to keep
it open.
If you want to keep the stadium very long, we need to make those repairs. We need to fix those rails. I would hate to have a massive crowd come down and crash through those rails. There are electrical issues that we need to get fixed, scoreboards needing replaced. So yeah, those are things that need to be done. We need to look at watering the field if we're going to keep grass. We need to look at the crowning of the field. You look down the different yard lines and they don't look straight. Well, it's not that they didn't try. There's some issues with the crown of the field. So those things do need to be addressed. There's safety issues in many cases, but we need to do something. Money has not been put into the stadium for a while, and it does need to be addressed if we're going to keep it.
And so my last question is, either decision we would make, and I know you don't have an answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway, where is the money going to come from?
Well, again, I think that's partly why we started out looking at wanting to address the desire of the two schools to bring their facilities up to what they need to be. We were looking at, and the declining use of the stadium, it does make sense to look at it as a sale of it as a potential revenue to help cover that. If we were to just do the stadium, then we need to find money in the budget or look for corporate sponsors or something. Because, at this point, we don't have specific plans for that. And again, the facility sales tax would take care of being able to do those.
So any other questions I have, Mr. Crawford?
If the three of you could address lacrosse and its apparent surging popularity and where you see it factoring into the pantheon of District 150 sports in the future.
Well, the IHSA considers it an emerging sport. Other emerging sports in the past have become more active. I cannot tell you one in my term, but that's pretty short term. Soccer, okay? Soccer now is everywhere. Neighboring schools, Dunlap, Dr. Kenny, do you, Chillicothe?
Bobby Darrell
No.
has the information. Bobby?
Does,
Bobby has the information.
couldn't wait to speak to it.
I know the Park District has a
About lacrosse.
the Park District has a program for lacrosse.
I've talked to, Notre Dame has a club lacrosse, and I've talked to Matt Blackburn about that and find out their schedule when they play. It's very at the tricycle stage. When I was in high school, I remember he said we're all going to go to the metric system, and I'm still doing it at 12 inches and all that kind of stuff. So, is it coming? They say it is. Is it going to be popular? You know, the big problem, one of the biggest problems is going to be if you add a sport, then you're going to take away athletes from another sport. And so, hopefully, it's going to be a situation where we're going to have enough athletes, student athletes, from the boys and the girls side. Or it might be something where we might have to have a club team, where just one team for District 150, and we'll play other club teams.
It's very popular in the suburbs. I mean, there were competitive leagues at the public schools already when I was in high school. But it's kind of an expensive sport, the equipment, which I don't know. That's what I would think would be the hurdle, is the personal equipment is fairly expensive.
We have,
$200.
Well, sure, but I mean, if you're running, my kid.
I get
It's
you.
a lot easier to get pickup
Well,
of
I think
soccer
the
than-
difference is you're talking about, 2,000, 3,000 students in a graduating class, and here we're anywhere from 700 to 1,500.
No, we had a competitive, I mean, on the North Shore, our high school graduating classes are 800, 1,200. And we had competitive lacrosse, but it's kind of I mean, the teams that play it at the college level are mostly Ivy League schools, and it's kind of a rich kid sport.
From my perspective on that, we have men's volleyball by the IHSA up north too. We don't have it down here because of the interest. We have, from what I found out, we have 9 to 11 lacrosse players at Ridgewoods High School right now. I've talked to most of them, and they would not play for the high school because they compete in these elite travel teams, and they want to compete with their elite travel teams because there's not enough competition around here for them to. I mean, if we went to a district club or 3 district schools, who are they going to compete against? We're going to drive to Chicago every weekend for a competition. So the ones that I talked to, they've told me they want to stick to their club, that they're already with. So
It's a scale problem. And
There might even be more interest in girls lacrosse than boys lacrosse, because the girls, I don't know if there are girls travel teams down here. But
not to my knowledge.
girls tend to start later. Girls start in high school. Boys tend to start younger.
Ms. Ross, you had a question?
I just wanted to reiterate the fact that what we're talking about, thinking outside the box when we talk about the lacrosse preparation, is not necessarily for an in-house project right now, but preparing ourselves to be a site that people would want to come in and take advantage of and maybe earn some revenue from it, which I think ours will grow, but thinking outside the box, we wouldn't just prepare the stadium for District 150, in my opinion.
If you could, just speak to the issue of what athletics does for student retention. I think there are a lot of times when you look at athletics as sort of well, you got to have that because you got to have it. But my sense is that in many cases, it's a very significant motivator for some students who are making some tough decisions in their life. It may be the difference. Is that accurate? Do you see that? Does the presence of a quality athletic program keep students in school?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
That was what I'm expecting, but give me some more help with this.
I don't even know where to go with that because, I mean, obviously we have a lot of kids with that stay in school so that they can be part of those athletic teams. We have coaches that are wonderful that talk to these kids every week about their grades. Their grades are improved because Brian mentioned that they sit there and they got 1 hour study tables before football practice. I mean, so those coaches are pleading with those kids, not the importance of football, but the importance of the education, you know?
Yeah.
How many athletes have we had go off to college, you know, and play sports over the last few years? I mean, I know at Richwoods, we had a girl go to Wisconsin on a full ride, and we had a young man go to Illinois. We've got a girl over in Princeton right now because she graduated in the IB program, and she got a full scholarship academically for that, and she played basketball for 4 years.
That's great.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think without a doubt, you know, kids love to participate in athletics, and as a part of it, they take care of their business in the classroom, so.
Mr. Darling, would you please add to that?
Yeah, can I add a couple things? Being a District 150 former student, I can just tell you what the role of athletics played in my life. And Coach Van Syke at Manual High School. Without Coach Van Syke to give me my structure, I don't think I'd be here on a Monday night on this given day. But Dave O'Day, on Friday night, he took a young man home 1:30 in the morning because they got back from Quincy. And that relationship you have with those students and those athletes, if you ask almost probably 90% of the coaches in District 150, you'll see so many grown former athletes, Coach, thank you. Thanks for what you did for me. Thanks for being there when I needed you. Thanks for trying to get my knucklehead straightened out when I was in high school. Doesn't always work, but that relationship with a kid, especially that doesn't have the structure at home, and those coaches give them that structure and the discipline that they need. And I think it just plays a major role for a lot of the kids that we have in District 150. So I think it's very, very, very important.
Thank you. Mr. Darling is the district athletic director, and we asked him to fill that in. Yes, Ms. Wolfmeyer, and then Ms.
It also makes a big difference in kids' lives. Kids, I think it helps attendance. Because I know kids, even my own kids, they wouldn't miss school, because if you miss school, you can't practice. If you don't practice, you miss a game. You know, and it just all dominoes. And it also, I felt like, kept my kids out of trouble. They're busy doing practices and going from one sport to another, and I think it helps. It also helps make a well-rounded kid, and they find a family in their teams, and they may not have that at home. So I think it's a very important part. Not for all kids. Some kids find that from other extracurriculars. It doesn't have to just be athletics, but those extracurriculars are very important to the students.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I have done a lot of reading on and talking to people about since I came on the board, because my experience with high school athletics is this much. I have varsity letter and marching band. And it's not something I liked, and it's not something I participated in as a student. But high school athletes have higher grades than non-athletes on average. It keeps kids in the classroom who are not academically all-stars. It keeps them coming to school. It keeps them in the classroom. It gives adult contact to some of these kids who have real rough home lives and need stable adults in their lives. And I know there's always the concern with sports that it will become more about winning than about developing young people, keeping them healthy. But I think our athletic department does a really wonderful job of keeping the focus where it belongs on developing these students into responsible adults and not winning games for high school glory. And I know that's always a concern, but I think that our department here does a really, really good job keeping the focus on the students and on their development. And I have become a wholehearted supporter of school athletics.
Thank you.
I've got two children that are both in high school, and they're both athletes, and they're both three-sport athletes. And I think time management plays a huge factor, because they know that they have to go to practice and they have to do their homework. And I see a lot better structure out of them coming home and getting things done because they have those other responsibilities. And it takes me back to when I was in college. I had to get a job, because if I didn't have a job and I got done at noon, I didn't do anything. I'd leave my homework till midnight, and I still didn't have it done. I got a job. It got me more structured. And I think time management's important for our athletes as well.
Ms. Costa.
I think a lot of it has to do with discipline, the discipline that you expect out of your athletes, as well as them disciplining themselves. My understanding is that there is a special relationship with coaches, and that's probably why you all are so successful, because of the fact that students are, they want to please not only themselves but the coach. They want to win. So I commend each of you because of the fact that I know that you go that extra mile, because many days I know that there are tough decisions that have to be made. I don't see sports dwindling. I really don't. I don't know what, I don't know what the data says, but it's been around for a long time, and I expect it to be for a long time more. I mean, I graduated in '69, and except for going to the stadium, school, everything is still the same. The same people are still playing basketball, people are still playing baseball and loving it. I don't see it going anywhere.
I don't think sports as a whole will. I have questions about football specifically because of the concussions and the lawsuits, yeah.
Yes.
I think too, if you look at a school, any of our schools, your athletes and your students who are participating in all the activities, they're not the ones who are constantly in trouble. They're not the ones who are constantly truant. And so I do believe that is a big thing. And I think every kid, no matter what they say, really wants that structure and wants discipline.
If I could just maybe add one more comment here,
Sure.
just very quickly. We're talking about what athletes are doing, what these sports do for the kids. I just kind of want to bring it back to also pride in the facilities and how important that is. And if you look at, again, what Galesburg is looking at, what Washington High School is looking at, what Dunlap has done in the last few years, and not just those, maybe a little bit not quite as glamorous, but most of the high schools around. Metamora High School has done some things. Morton is looking at doing some things. IBC has done some things here in the last 6 or 7 years where they've worked very hard to improve their athletic facilities. And I really do think that if our kids want to have that same kind of pride and spirit in what they're doing, and they're working hard, I think we do need to look at our facilities. I think we need to look at our facilities at their schools and see what we can do to be competitive. So I think it's very important.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate your hard work and the staff that you have, and we know it's you've got your hands full, and we appreciate that. Thank you very much. I would make one other observation, and that is that if the county school facility sales tax is really the financial opportunity that it appears to be, a lot of these decisions that we're talking about here need to be considered after we determine whether that is going to pass or not in Peoria County. And that is in the March primary, I believe. That's somewhere around that time. March 18th, I believe, is, yeah. So in terms of the timing of this, we may have to make some preliminary decisions here, but there will be a good deal of time between now and then. And if that passes, we have a whole different set of opportunities. If it doesn't pass, we've got a whole different set of questions. So, and I've made this comment before, this is not going to be settled quickly. We've got a lot to do, and we've got a lot of things to understand before we go forward. So with that, we'll bring that to a close. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, and it's great to see you here. Unless there's anything else, let's move on then to the consent agenda. And
Wait.
I'm sorry.
I just want to make one comment about the presentation of all the conglomerations, let's call them, okay? I think those are very attractive, but I just want to kind of go on record. I don't think, if it goes to that, I don't think we as a school board ought to be considering projects like that. I mean, they're very exciting. I appreciate you brought that.
How far are you talking, Chris? Are you talking just about the making Peoria Stadium a little bigger?
No.
You're talking about those other
I'm talking about
facilities.
where we're building facilities for the community to enjoy. I don't think that ought to, and what, well, let me back up, because that's a bit because the community certainly will enjoy any kind of football stadium that we might build down at Manual or Central. But I'm talking about where it's like rent them out for your kid's birthday party.
Okay.
We should not go that far as a school district.
Who talked about
The east side's, the big.
East Side Center,
great big huge
things like that.
Yeah.
And I know you brought those kind of just for fun, but that is for another discussion and perhaps for another body to consider.
Yes. Gotcha. Very good, thank you. Vice President Wolfmeyer, would you please help us through the consent agenda?
The consent agenda tonight consists, first of all, gifts to the school district. This meeting, they total $5,254.08, with a year-to-date total of $60,060.71. They range from book bags and school supplies, to camp scholarships, to Cornstalk Theater and the Sun Foundation. There were donations totaling $6,100 made to the Peoria Public Schools Foundation. We thank all of the donors for their generosity and certainly appreciate all of that. It also includes the approval of the payment of bills, the approval of the Human Resources Report, the approval of the payments for travel. Number 5 is the sale of Peoria Alternative School. The proposed action is that the Peoria Alternative School Adult Center building and property located at 839 West Moss Avenue be declared no longer necessary or suitable for school purposes, and that the administration be directed to offer the property for public at an auction sale to the highest bidder. Item 6 is a settlement agreement with District 150 and District 325. The proposed action is this settlement agreement is made and entered into by and between the Board of Education of Peoria Public School 150 and the Peoria Board of Education of Peoria Heights Community Unit School District 325 to resolve a tax issue occurring during tax years 1998 through 2010. During this time period, District 150 received tax revenue from certain parcels of real estate which were situated within District 325's boundaries. The two parties have agreed to resolve this matter for the amount of $20,000 with no further claims or litigation. Item 7 is a field trip approval. The proposed action is that the Board of Education approve the field trip for Richwoods Marine Corps ROTC program to travel to Pacific, Missouri, October 25th and 26th, 2013, to compete in a drill and rifle meet at Pacific High School per Board Policy 6:250 as presented. There is no charge to students for this event. Number 8 is field trip approval. The proposed action is that the Board of Education approve the field trip for select avid 9th through 11th grade students from Peoria High School per Board Policy 6:240 as presented. Students will travel to Jacksonville, Illinois, November 1st and 2nd, 2013, visiting Illinois College and McMurray College to gain exposure to college communities and culture. This trip meets the requirements of the AVID program, which provides exposure to college and assistance with academics and admission to first-generation college students. This trip will be funded by the SIG grant. Item 9 is news for my school agreement. The proposed action is that the Board of Education is asked to approve an agreement with News for My School to coordinate sales efforts for advertisements on designated school and/or district websites and in the Remarkable Times e-newsletter. News for My School will sell pre-approved advertisement space and content agreed upon by the district public relations department. News for My School will reimburse the district at 40% of net sales paid quarterly. The terms of this agreement are for 1 year and can be automatically renewed. Item 10 is a settlement agreement with Gramercy Realty for property taxes. The proposed action is that the board accepts the settlement agreement as presented. And item 11 is the FY14 Secondary Transitional Experience Program Contract Transition Specialist Renewal with Department of Human Services, Division of Rehabilitation Services. The proposed action is that authorization is granted for the administration to renew its third-party cooperative agreement for FY14 with the Department of Human Services, Division of Rehabilitation Services to continue operation of the Secondary Transitional Experience Program, or STEP program, and Transition Specialist Program. Total cost for the Transition Specialist Program is $246,280.83. DRS funding commitment is $158,507. The DRS funding commitment for the STEP program is $190,244.29. The total District 150 commitment is $87,773.83, and that's your consent agenda.
Thank you, Vice President Wolfmeyer. Would any member of the board like to have any of these pulled for a separate vote? Ms. Patel. Number 9. Anyone else? Could I have a motion then to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item number 9?
Second.
Let's have some discussion on this. I believe that item number 5, the sale of Peoria Alternative School, is of concern, particularly to the Moss Bradley Residential Association. We've received some correspondence from them about this. And Dr. Kinney, if you could you speak about how we would go about this and what the timing is so that people are a little more comfortable with the way this goes?
Sure. All this is doing tonight is just declaring it as excess property so we can begin a process of a potential sale of the property. What would happen next, and we don't have a particular auction set up, we do have some people that have expressed interest, and what would happen is we would advertise for an auction. This is by law. We'll advertise 3 times. We will actually have an auction, and we would have a minimum bid that would be advertised as part of the auction packet. And then we would go through the auction process, and it's an interesting one, but assuming that somebody does meet the minimum bid, we would then work with them to begin a journey, not sure how to describe it any other way, of working with the city, because there would have to be a zoning change for just about anything that would be done, short of maybe putting apartments in there or something like that. But we do know that it is a historical site. We've made any potential people interested in it that is the case, that they would have to work closely with the city to get approval for zoning. And should that happen, then a sale agreement would be finalized, and we'd give the title over to them. But generally, when 2 people reach an agreement on the sale of a piece of real estate, you expect a closing to last or happen about 30 days later. This will take months, and we're prepared for that process. We know it because we want to make sure that people are comfortable with that particular sale. Now, we can't necessarily totally control who buys it, but certainly the city can help us control what happens with the property when all is said and done. So,
Ms. Patel.
And in fact, is it possible for the district to simply enter into a sales contract with a particular preferred buyer? Or are we required to auction?
We can only sell a piece of property to another government agency. In the case of a particular private buyer, we have to go through an auction process. That's designed to be very transparent about the sale. It does allow other people, once they hear about the legal notices and so forth, if they want to get involved, they can. So that's the only way we can actually do this.
So our input into who we sell to is limited or non-existent?
Well, it certainly would be limited. There's some control just by virtue of us determining a minimum price. That's going to remove a lot of people that think they just want to own a school, and not do anything with it. Certainly, it's going to be people that are going to, I would hope, have the ability to do something with it. Otherwise, they're not going to be interested in meeting a minimum price.
Okay, so any other questions or comments on that? Okay, then on item number 10, the settlement agreement with Gramercy Realty for property taxes. This is at 301 Southwest Adams, which is the PNC Bank building, as I understand it.
Yeah, this is just a settlement where they did challenge their property values. They did win. We will have to pay them something back because it's an old challenge, and this just lessens how much we have to pay back. So okay, it's worth the effort.
Any other questions about any of the items? Okay, with that, let's call the roll, please.
Ms. Patel?
Patel?
Aye.
Mrs. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. Crawford?
Aye.
Mrs. Wolfmeyer?
Aye.
Mrs. Costick?
Aye.
Mrs. Butler?
Aye.
Mr. Floyd?
Aye, thank you.
7 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried.
Let's then consider item number 9. This is the News for My School agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah, I just, and I trust Mr. Copland's judgment, but I have a real problem with advertising and monetizing public services like this. I understand we need the money, but there's a point past which I'm not comfortable advertising through children, and this is the point.
Is there
That is
some indication
Can we
of,
go, Remarkable Times
I
is for
know,
parents
but it's
and
also school
community members.
newsletters, and it really bothers me as a parent that my child's enrollment in public school is going to be used to target advertisements at me. I have a moral problem with this. I understand it's probably going to be fine. I'm gonna get them, it's not gonna bother me, but for me, this is just a step too far.
is there, yeah, I assume you can't opt out of this?
You could opt out of the different things, Remarkable Times, the other things that we've talked about.
You opt
parents
out of
having
the
right to opt
newsletters.
out. Not the school newsletters that come home, no.
So, Mr. Copeland, what's the potential for the revenue from this? Just,
Obviously, it depends on interest. The company does only sell to one category, so there won't be 4 or 5 used car lots advertised on the website. But we're looking at possibly just 3 to 4 advertisements on the website and then on Remarkable Times as well. So I know they've given me examples of other communities that do several advertisements, 6 to 9, I believe, and with revenue of up to $10,000 a year.
so we're talking in the neighborhood of $4,000 to $8,000 revenue annually for this.
Correct.
And can you explain what the revenue would be used for? Does it go back into
The communications budget, probably.
I mean, I have less of a problem with this than I would children bringing candy home or stuff to, candles home to sell at Christmas time. I have a real problem with that, but I don't have a problem with this.
It'd be better if we funded our schools $8,000 or $10,000 more so that we did not have to sell our student lists to advertisers. But okay.
This is a
Yeah,
one-year agreement?
Since we get paid so
Correct.
much, then we could turn our salaries back in and be able to do that.
So, Ms. Patel, could you live with a one-year pilot test of this?
I'm voting no.
I understand that.
I'm gonna
That's
live with
okay.
it and it will be fine, and I'm sure
Okay.
that I will see them
Democratic
in the
vote.
newsletter and it will be fine. But I don't have to like it, and I'm not gonna vote for it.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand. Are we giving out student lists to this group, or are they just
No.
putting advertisements on the website?
They send the advertisement to me. Once
Okay.
they sell it, they'll send me the graphic work and all, and put it on the website or in the newsletter.
Okay.
Are we doing something like this at this point right now?
No, we're not.
Okay. All right, well, let's call the question.
I didn't mean to make it such a big thing, I'm sorry.
No, but it's worth discussing. I mean, thank you.
No.
Yes?
Could you be more emphatic?
Aye.
Mrs. Wolfmeyer?
Aye.
Mrs. Costick?
Aye.
Mrs. Butler?
Aye.
Mr. Floyd?
Aye.
6 ayes, 1 nay, motion carried.
We'll revisit this in a year, and we may all be proven wrong or right, one way or the other. Thank you.
I hope we make this big a deal out of it.
Okay, we have the deliberation agenda, which is next. Ms. Ross?
Yes, revocation of board probation. And I move that the revocation of board probation listed on the report dated September 23rd, 2013 be approved as presented.
Second.
Madam Secretary?
Ms. Patel?
Abstain?
Mrs. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. Crawford?
Aye.
Mrs. Wolfmeyer?
Aye.
Mrs. Costa?
Aye.
Mrs. Butler?
Aye.
Mr. Floyd?
Aye.
6 ayes, 1 abstain, motion carries.
Number 13.
Number 13, expulsions. I move that the expulsions listed on the report dated September 23rd, 2013 be approved as presented.
Second.
Madam Secretary?
Mrs. Patel?
Abstain?
Mrs. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. Crawford?
Aye.
Mrs. Wolfmeyer?
Aye.
Mrs. Costa?
Aye.
Mrs. Butler?
Aye.
Mr. Floyd?
Aye.
6 ayes, 1 abstain, motion carries.
Students expelled by the board are referred to by number, thereby ensuring privacy, and board action concerning the students has been decided in executive session.
Thank you. Item number 14 is a budget resolution. Proposed action is that the Board of Education approve the following resolution. Whereas the Board of Education of Peoria School District 150, County of Peoria, State of Illinois, caused to be prepared for a tentative budget, and the Secretary of the Board has made the same conveniently available for public inspection for at least 30 days prior to the final action thereon. And whereas a public hearing was held as to such budget on the 23rd day of September 2013, notice of said hearing was given at least 30 days prior thereto required by law, and all other legal requirements have been complied with. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Education of said district as follows, that the budget containing an estimate of amounts available in each fund separately and the expenditures from each be and the same is hereby adopted as the budget of this school district for the 2013-2014 fiscal year. Could I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Dr. Kinney, the forecast for the budget, could you give us a rough number of what that looks like?
Yes. We have it set with a deficit of just under 6 million. And certainly, one of our goals throughout the year will be to close that gap as we have for the last 3 years.
And last year, our forecast budget was?
It was right at about 4 million when we forecasted it. As I said in our presentation, I'm a little on the conservative side when we do this. So hopefully we will close that gap just as we did this year and the last 2 years.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion on this resolution on the budget? Reverend Butler.
Nothing more than to say thank you to Dr. Kinney for all your hard work over these past few years, because it has made a great difference in our being informed and able to pass budgets, knowing that they're a challenge, but yet remaining hopeful that things will be better. So thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. I know that that takes a lot of time. Good job. Madam Secretary?
Aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. We've now come to the place on our agenda where members of the public may address the school board on any topic. Please come to the podium and give your name for the benefit of our minutes. The time limit for any one speaker is 2 minutes, and the time limit for any topic is 8 minutes. No person less than 18 years of age may address the board unless accompanied by his or her parent, guardian, or teacher, except with the unanimous consent of the board. Sharon Cruz.
Well, at the September 9 board meeting, Dr. Lathan issued a bit of a reprimand to me by telling the audience that I had omitted some important information from my comments. As word for word as I could transcribe it from the recording, Dr. Lathan stated, "What was omitted tonight as it related to the credit card purchases, the Foia that was attached to the request shared that purchases on the superintendent's charge card is also for purposes of other district department programs and individual programs, so not as just the superintendent's credit card that she purchased these items. Very clearly outlined in the Foia that these are for other departments as well, not just for Woodruff, for books, iPads, you name it." None of that information was shared, attached, or clearly or unclearly outlined in the letter accompanying the charge card records. To what document were you referring? The only explanatory statement in the August 28th Foia response letter read, "Please note that each and every charge itemized on the statements enclosed are for school district-related expenses and not personal expenses of the superintendent. I have no doubt that a lawyer, for a fee, advised that such a statement was appropriate and necessary." And I still would, if you don't mind, answering my question about where to find the financial information so that I don't have to FOIA it anymore. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Terry Knapp.
Terry Knapp, 922 West Wilshire Drive, Peoria. Dr. Kenny, Mr. Kenny, I would like to congratulate you on a tremendous report. I thought that was something the public's needed for a long time. I know Ms. Patel, within the last year, was not even aware that we were going to sell the stadium or have stadia at Manual and Central. I remember that very clearly. It reminds me and smacks of the Woodruff closure. Ms. Wolfmeyer, you kind of were saying, oh, we might have to do this pretty quick here, just like Woodruff, where we didn't wait a year, we didn't do anything. We didn't even have meetings in the community about the closure of Woodruff. And then we voted 4-3 to close Woodruff, for a school that is sending their teams down to practice at Woodruff. Never did close Woodruff. It's still amazing to me how those kids in the North End are bussed all over creation without any respect to those children and those families. I would also like to state again about the stadium, keeping the stadium green. I think it's very important of all your discussions. I would like to know personally, have you talked to the city about the revenue from the riverboat? Have you talked to the Park District about conveying the title of the land at the stadium to the Park District so that they can work with groups in the community to keep the stadium viable? You can go ahead and have your stadiums at Richwood Central and Manual. That's not an issue. Keep the stadium green. Keep the public happy. If you want support in the spring on your referendum, you better start marketing it. I think, Mr. Kenny, you did a good job of that tonight. I know Mr. Cloyd said before we couldn't spend money to market, and that might be true, but at the same time, you did a good job of marketing. You're the only one to date that has done that. Thank you.
Savino Sierra.
Okay, my name's Savino Sierra, and you got my address. I think it's wiser to renovate the Peoria Stadium. The thing of it is, we don't market that stadium enough. I've been around a lot of years in this town, and I remember when it was in its full glory. And you're always trying to get rid of some of Peoria's most noted, landmarks in the city. I was down at Quincy, and you should see some of those buildings, the architect in it, because I've worked in a lot of buildings, churches, universities, whatever have you. And you people, it seems like you don't give a damn, trying to make a few bucks so you can spend them unwisely. You sold that Harrison School. It's still standing. If you don't do anything more to it, it's going to outlive the new Harrison School that you built, because they don't use the materials that they did in the old days when I first started in the trades back in 1949. And I'm no dummy, so I'm telling you, we should renovate that stadium and put handrails on the steps going up for the older people. The grandpas in that. I have a grandson that quarterbacks for Manual, and the whole family goes to all the games. We support our team, and this is what we have to do. We have to have the parents to support their children, you know. They just send them to the school and let the coach babysit them and what have you, you know.
Thank you, sir. Your time has
Yeah.
expired.
Okay, and that's another thing that's unfair. On the second, you only have 2 minutes. You guys took over 2 hours to make your case, so have a little charity.
Jeffrey Atkins Dutro.
Good evening, Jeff Atkins Dutro. And yeah, I'd like to reiterate the Harrison comment. If you stand on the front lawn of the new Harrison and look across the street, there's the old Harrison, dilapidated, abandoned, crumbling, and dangerous. So when we sell any more buildings, I'd say proceed with caution. We have a new union fitness liaison, Charlie Thomas. He'll be looking forward to talking to you about fitness as it pertains to the children in District 150. We want our students mentally and physically worn out by the end of the school day. Students are given nutritious food, ample structured exercise, discipline issues will drop, and achievement scores will go up. 4 members of the Illinois Federation of Teachers came to town to talk with coordinators of our 3 community schools, Treewin, Harrison, Manual. We in the IFT look forward to working with the district to expand our community school services in Peoria. The coordinators had students doing some impressive activities, including one that really stood out, horseback riding at Treewin. And we're not just talking about getting on a horse and going around in circles. They're actually getting competition certified, which I thought was fascinating. And I think these horses have actually been down on the lawn at Treewin. So kudos to the coordinators. Thank you.
Matthew Leary.
Oh, Matthew Leary, 2218 West Moss. I just want to know why it's so difficult to get a hold of anybody at the district. We've been trying to reach people since July. No one will call us back. We finally did call the superintendent. She finally got a first call back, but it didn't help us with anything. And then we called again. We can't get a call back. She calls us at quarter till close on a Friday, so we have to wait till Monday. The secretaries give us the runaround. We call back to the superintendent over and over again. We ask for a meeting. They're rude. We get more communication from the regional superintendent than we do from our local superintendent and anybody else at the offices. We have to wait in here for somebody to see us while they walk past us over and over again. How is a parent supposed to be involved in the education? Is parental involvement not important in an education? Your website states that you want to work with the customer, which is the taxpayers, the community members, and the students, but you're not working with anybody. And I'd like to see some changes in that.
Trina Leary.
Hi, I'm Trina Leary. That was my husband, and I'll give you an insight of what exactly is going on, and hopefully I can get enough out so that you guys are understanding where we're coming from. Our daughter was screened this past summer for the early kindergarten entry program. We were informed that our daughter did not meet the criteria due to the fact that she didn't pass the PASI literacy assessment, which was not stated in the list of requirements for the early kindergarten program, whereas the grant screening is stated in there, and which she did pass. We tried multiple times to try to contact Ms. Shamika Sykes-Patterson and Dr. LaToya Kennedy. We have no luck. After no luck of any of them returning a voicemail, phone calls, we left numerous messages. We decided, my husband and I and our 2 children, we sat in the front desk area for nearly 2 hours for anyone to even speak with us. We did speak briefly with finally with Ms. Sykes-Patterson, and we voiced some of our concerns because the screening results did not correspond with the actual screening. She proposed another assessment to be done. We later found out when I took my daughter to this other screening assessment, it was an IQ test. The individual screening my daughter informed us that he had never even given an IQ test to any individual as young as my daughter. After our daughter had her IQ test done, we later found out District 150, Ms. Sykes-Patterson was supposed to contact us, let us know what was the results and whatnot, and where would she be able to attend District 150 school. No phone calls, no return messages. I myself went up to Bradley, got the test results. We found out our daughter tests her IQ test in the 82nd percentile, meaning that her IQ is higher than 82% of kids in her age range in the country. However, Dr. Kennedy refuses to let her into our program. I am sorry, I know this is more than a 2-minute discussion. How does Matthew, hold on. How does a child whose IQ is in the top 18% of the country does not even get a chance at a kindergarten program in District 150? Where is the other kids ranging? Where does our daughter range? I can go on. I have numerous things that was stated in here, but I want to, before I end this, we have many comments and concerns and questions about this program. If you are in charge of the curriculum and instruction programs in District 150, aren't you willing to interact with us? Who exactly are we supposed to interact with if they're not willing to interact with us? And if this program is supposed to exist in within a district, then every student that applies for this and the parents are getting involved, the children should have a fair chance at this.
Thank you for your comments. I believe we will make.
Can I have an extension? I just have 2 sentences left.
I believe Dr. Kennedy is going to spend some time talking to you. This is a student confidentiality issue.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to discuss it in public. So.
Who do I know? The regional.
Dr. Kennedy is sitting right here.
And she walked right past us the last time. We stood out there.
I'm not going to debate you about what
and
she
I'm
did
not
or how
asking
she
you
is.
to debate me. We just need to be heard. No one is willing to hear us. That is the problem that we're having. No one in District 150 is willing to lend an ear to us. This has been going on since before the school year started.
Jim Evenhouse.
My name is Jim Evenhuis, and I live at 1627 West Barker Avenue in the historic Moss Bradley Residential Association. I think all of you probably received a letter from us today, so I'm not going to bore you with all of the details of that. We're proud of our neighborhood. There are many architectural gems up there. Washington School is one of the gems. We hope that we can sit at the table with the people influencing the sale of this school so that we can have an influence on who buys it. I'm very familiar with what happened over at Pekin High School. A slum landlord purchased that and sat on it for years. He was the highest bidder. We don't agree with that process if we can't make ourselves known. We want that school to be repurposed to be a very credible part of our community. I commend you for what you're doing. I was a District 150 employee for 17 years, went into the private industry. I see many of the things that you're faced with today. One of the things that we have to do is hold on to our quality neighborhoods. And this is one of our pleas. Please allow us to sit at the table, or at least let us know how we can be in the discussion of this procedure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Kinney, I know you spoke to that process already. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I have his contact information. We can certainly talk with him and the city at the same time.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Presentations or suggestions by board members. Do we have any of those this evening?
No responses.
No responses, I'm sorry, I missed that point. But since you have none, I guess I didn't. Presentation suggestions by board members. Reverend Butler.
Mr. Cloy, I have a suggestion in regards to board governance and our communication with one another. Since the last board meeting, I became aware of an email that was sent from a local organization to 4 of the board members that had asked for slightly some action at the last board meeting. To that, as I reviewed it and thought about how that could be very challenging to, as we talk about the integrity and the transparency of the work that we do, that when you see on the emails that there have been other board members excluded, and yet it is being asked of the board to take some form of action at a meeting, that the rest of us, at least that email be forwarded to us so that we too can be prepared for that board meeting and discussion. So that's my suggestion for my fellow board members.
Okay, made a note of that. I think there's some practical considerations in terms of how that's done, but.
Well, to me, it borders on the line
For
of-
example, if someone sent an email to one board member, would it be appropriate to send it then to the other 6?
Well, in particular, where this email seemed to intentionally excluded 3 other board members. And it's obvious the other 4, because they were mentioned by name, to look more closely at those things. And again, because it did ask for some action or some addressing of that issue at the board meeting, if the rest of us could be just as prepared as the other 4 by that request.
In this particular case, the organization emailed the 4 white board members and left out the 3 black board members, and 4 is a majority of the board, and they were seeking action by a majority of the board. It was an incredibly poor taste, and I mean, I don't know what we can necessarily do as a board, because I don't always notice the email headers on my email and who everyone it's going to, and people carbon copy and blind carbon copy. But if you're out in the community and sending us an email, that's pretty much the worst way to do it.
Well, I think here's the thing, is that when you, when a person is, just for protocol, when you are just sending an email, making a statement, just general information, it's fine to email 1 or 2 board members. However, when you are asking for support of this whole board, which consists of 7 people, it's important that we all be on the same page, and we all receive the same correspondence. It was very blatant that we were left off, very blatant, and I didn't appreciate it.
Well,
Ms. Ross.
again, we go back to the responsibility. See, I mean, even though I haven't been board president in the last 13 years, although I've run for board president in the last 13 years, I would make a very, 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 very good board president, because by now I know all the rules. Fact is, I think sometimes when everything falls back to the president. If I had been president and I would have received such an email, I would have made sure that I forwarded that on to the people who had been left off of that list, and also corresponded back to the person that sent the email and said, there are 7 board members here. Actually, as president, I'm only 1 board member. I have only 1 vote. The information I give to the public is only information that comes from my board that entrusted in me to share the information. I don't make my own decisions, and I don't make my own statements. The only statements that should be made are statements that's representative of the entire board. So, again, I think that sometimes maybe it's in poor taste for some people in the public. The onus lies on us, or maybe on the leader who is supposed to facilitate, convene the board and facilitate the board meeting, to then make sure that everybody feels included. It was just, it was just too obvious that we were left out, and it just doesn't feel good.
Mr. Crawford?
Couple of things. First off, Mr. Sierra during his comments used the D word. I consider that a swear word. I would ask the audience, don't laugh at me. You're on video. This is Mr. Knapp was saying he thinks I'm being petty, and I'm
say that.
In any event, I would hope that just keep it clean. This is a school function, so to speak, and we try to ask for our students not to use that kind of language. I'd appreciate those who are making audience comments. Likewise, don't use those kinds of words. Finally, there's been a lot of talk about football tonight. Just show me on the record as if there's ever a discussion that we're considering ever getting rid of football, I am a big no vote on that, and I will stomp from the podium if that ever comes up as well, because I think all this talk of getting rid of football across the country is silly discussion. In fact, it's been noted with recent settlements in the NFL that there is no evidence of concussions and related long-term bodily injury in terms of brain injury and that kind of thing. Parkinson's disease, whatever they've tried to tie it to. That's the reason that an industry that's worth nearly $1 trillion only settled for $974 million, which is chump change in the grand scheme of things. So I am a big no vote on that issue, even though it's not a vote for vote.
No, it is not. Reports from board committees.
Yeah. There's no, before we leave from suggestions, I would like to convene a subcommittee or ad hoc committee around, although we have, I know if most people may not know the procedure of the discipline, when discipline is brought to the board, usually two board members, all board members have access to the information, but two board members make up a committee that review all of the discipline issues and then go to report to the full board in executive session, because the students' names cannot be released to the public. So, but what I would like to do is I would like this board to establish and I'll be happy to lead it, the ad hoc committee, since I am retired and I have all this time on my hand. This is a committee that will look at our structure, our discipline structure, because, we seem to do the same thing and expect different results. We'll expel a child, and the parents sometimes show up and sometimes they won't, and then we put the child in alternative and we go back around, and not every child, but we go back around next year the same problem exists. So I would like to have someone work with us on an ad hoc committee looking at some alternatives, some other alternatives. And so, of course, there would be an administrative person, and maybe another board member and some community people around an ad hoc committee only meets a certain amount of times to come up with some recommendations for the board.
How does that correspond to the activities of the Parent-Teacher Advisory Committee?
In the past, that's been within the Parent-Teacher Advisory Committee's mandate. When Mrs. Ross was running that committee, they redid the discipline matrix and looked at all of those disciplinary issues.
It's
I
not
don't
the
have-
same thing, because I did kick off the Parent-Teacher Advisory Committee. That's more of a universal committee that looks at, whatever relating to children, but I'm not talking about a changing of the policy or anything like that. I'm looking at ways that we can address an issue that is an ongoing issue. I don't enjoy expelling, 10, 12, 17, 18 kids every board meeting. And so we've got to do something different. Something outside the box. And I didn't see that on your agenda for the year.
But I think it's something, Ms. Patel, when we have our next meeting on the 10th, can be brought up for information.
It certainly can be. I have no objection to the board choosing to handle it through Parent-Teacher Advisory Committee, Committee of the Whole, or a new subcommittee. I just think with Parent-Teacher Advisory Committee, as we learned at our first meeting of the year, we do need to be clear what the boundaries of that committee are, and if discipline is not within that committee's mandate, then we need to know that, and it needs to go into the board policy.
I don't think you have a board policy.
Yeah, discipline is within PTAC.
I think that's by state school code, as I understand it.
It is by state code. I'm very familiar with it because I was the first one that kicked it off when they wrote the code. It's within there, and maybe I'm not talking about discipline. You know, so.
Well, if I may, you have a couple
Please.
options. I mean, you can do it, what you're discussing, Mrs. Ross, as part of the Parent-Teacher Advisory Committee right now, and looking at that specifically, or you can appoint a new committee, you know, based on whatever the board's discussions are on your policy to handle the subject matter that you're referring to. So, I mean, you have options. It's just as what direction the board wants to take it. But if you're looking strictly at, you know, discipline and consequences, I mean, that falls within what the Parent-Teacher Advisory Committee.
Well, that's fine. So let me do this then. Let me request, as a board member, that the Parent-Teacher Advisory Committee address the issue that I brought up and looking at alternatives to the alternatives that we have that will address the discipline, you know, issues differently than they do now.
That's fine.
And
if
I would
that's-
I would like to have that on the agenda.
I mean, I suppose our report to the board from our committee would be that we discussed in our most recent meeting, and I mean, I have no particular territoriality about this. If this is what you want to do, I am delighted
Well,
to
that
have
has
you do that.
always been my passion. It wasn't my choice not to be on the Parent-Teacher
Sure.
Advisory Committee.
I'm
That
just
was-
saying, I have no interest in, you know, I'm not territorial about this. I just want to make sure I understand what my mandate is on the Parent-Teacher Advisory Committee. And what we had talked about at our most recent meeting, which we just had 2 weeks ago, maybe, was we were talking about looking at the district's cell phone and personal technology policies in an intensive way, as we did with the bullying policy last year, and looking deeper into cyberbullying, personal devices, and issues like that.
And if you note that was an issue we spent almost a year on, the cell phone policy. Yeah, and you were on the committee, several other people, that's the issue we spent almost a year on.
But it's not just the
And
cell.
we changed some policies
Okay,
relating to that.
but cell phones change, and they change rapidly, and it's not just cell phones, it's personal devices, it's iPads, it's personal computers, it's devices students bring from home into our technology infrastructure. And we had discussed 2 years ago, I had asked the board at a committee of the whole what issues the board wanted addressed by the Parent-Teacher Advisory Committee. And at that time, the issues were bullying, cell phone policy implementation, and so forth, and sexual harassment of students by students were the three big issues that came up. We tackled bullying last year. We went ahead to look at cell phones this year, both because it's something the board had talked about, it's something that's been an ongoing issue in the schools, and it's something that's personally interesting to me. If that is not what the board wants the committee to address this year, that's fine. I'm happy to address whatever the board would like to direct us to address.
Okay, let me suggest something. If the board doesn't want to do it, then I can convene an ad hoc committee, absent of the board, and bring some suggestions to our administration, if the board doesn't want to address the issues that I'm talking about.
Reverend Butler.
No, I was just going to suggest to Mrs. Ross is that before our next board meeting, if you could give us some type of written focus or how you would like for this committee to look at these issues, some of the particulars. I believe there's nothing wrong with us presenting that at the committee on October 10th, and feel free to come and be a part of that, maybe perhaps to clarify if the committee has some other questions. But I think we can look at that.
Yeah. I mean,
like you said, even as you were putting this together, of saying maybe this is or this isn't what I'm looking at. One, the committee's gonna wanna know for sure what it is that we're looking at, so I would invite a written document with focus as
That's
well as.
fine.
Okay.
And I find this committee overwhelmingly difficult to keep on task. And so my primary goal is to know what I'm supposed to keep everyone doing so that we can stay on that task, because it's a very easy committee to turn into just a diffuse complaining session about how kids today, need to get off my lawn. So.
Anything further? Any other committees?
October 10th.
October 10th. There being no other reports, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.